All right, good morning. We're going to get started. Thank you all for being here. This is our second task force meeting to study issues related to our jail and justice system and develop recommendations related to its future for our Board of County Commissioners. Again, there's refreshments in the back corner. The restrooms are right outside the hall. Please don't hesitate to get up throughout the meeting. It's jam-packed this morning. We do have a couple of breaks built in. We're fortunate to have representatives from Vera back in town to help us navigate these conversations and digest and collect the appropriate information and the necessary information. And we also have Wendy Ware from JFA here, who has been working on quantitative data analysis related to our local jail population. So this is something we've all been very hungry for a long time, and we're eager to dig into the numbers a bit more today. Before I hand it over, I just want to give a couple of thank yous before we get started. One, Karen Westberg in the back, thank you for making sure all the little pieces that would have fallen through the cracks didn't this morning. Diane Lindquist, our data analyst, helped an immense amount getting everything ready, validating data, working to support Wendy and JFA. So we threw you in the deep end, but you're doing wonderfully, so thank you. And then finally, I want to recognize and thank Director Sparber for all of your work getting those tours set up for our task force members. Over half of you participated in tours of our downtown jail facility and a few less out at Geiger. I heard a lot of appreciation back from several of you, and many of you articulated the fact that this was really your first time considering the experience of jail from the perspective not only of the individuals who are incarcerated, but the folks who are working the facility as well. And I think that is a really exciting perspective and dialogue to continue to engage in, because we need to think about these issues broadly from all perspectives. I know that we come to this with a lot of different experiences, and we might use different language, but ultimately we are working for the same goal. We want to do right by our community and make it safer and healthier. So, Sparber, I know it's not an easy environment to get us access to, and thanks for all your work there. So we will turn it over to Liz Swoboda from Vera, and you can introduce your team, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. As Maggie said, I'm Liz Swoboda from the Vera Institute. I also have Alex Bolden, Chris May, and Caitlin Call here with me from our team. And as Maggie said, Wendy Ware is also here with us, but we'll let her introduce herself in just a bit. So jumping right in, here's our agenda for today. As Maggie said, it's pretty jam-packed. We are going to start with some introductions, just so we know who we're meeting with, do some ground rules like we did last time, give you some updates on the process and where we are, and then we're going to hear from Wendy about her data findings, take a break so that you can digest all that wonderful data, and then we're going to talk about breaking into some subcommittees to help the work keep moving forward. And then at the end, we will have time for public comment.
Really quickly,
yes.
You all have folders in front of you. We got feedback last time that the screen here is small, so we do have handouts for you. We would just ask that the people jumping ahead across the room just be patient. We'll get there, and so just let us walk you through the slides as we go. And then also all of the materials, just like last time, will be posted online for everyone. And if anyone needs anything additional, please contact me.
Yeah, and Karen's going to be sending around a sign-in sheet for you all. Okay, so introductions and ground rules. So if we could go around quickly, just say who you are and what agency you're here representing. We'll start right here.
Hi, I'm Tanya Wallace, and I'm with Spokane County.
Al French, County Commissioner.
Judge Jennifer Fossbender on behalf of Judge Smith here today, Spokane County District Court.
Curtis Hampton, SCAR.
Tracy Staub, Spokane Municipal Court.
Tom Kuzminski, County Public Defender.
Justin Nealon, Spokane City Prosecutor.
Nick Andrews, City Public Defender.
Mike Sparber, Justice Services.
Kathleen Trillis, Spokane County Community Services, Housing and Community Development.
Mary Cuny, Spokane County Commissioner.
Kurt Watkins, Spokane Illinois City.
Kathy McEnroe, Providence, Health Care.
Dave Ells, Undersheriff, Spokane County Sheriff's Office.
Jan Dobbs, Frontier Media Health.
Justice Landgraf, Assistant Chief, Spokane Police. Ben Steigert, City of Spokane.
I'm Deborah Jones, Racial Equity Committee.
Erin Williams, here, Lutheran Community Services.
Dan Sigler, Pioneer Human Services.
Pam Haley, City of Spokane Valley.
Kerry Driscoll, Spokane Valley.
Maggie Yates, Law and Justice Administrator. Back here.
Teresa Sanders, City of Spokane. Katie Shane, Community Building Foundation.
Morgan Kudelka, City of Spokane. Oh, sorry.
This is Soren.
Dean Lynch, Spokane County Human Rights Task Force.
Christina Cody, Office of the Police Ombudsman. I'm Karen Westwood with the Law Administrator. Leanne Lynn, Peace, Law and Justice.
Ben Steigert, City of Spokane.
Mike Mercury Recovery Cafe SOAR program, which is state opiate response.
Mark Hamlin.
Liz Moore, Peace and Justice Action League and Smart Justice Spokane.
Doug Van Horn, Public Radio.
Next round of Columbia Legal Services.
Pam Wilson, Community Member.
I'm Ozzie Grippentrog, I'm assisting Spokane County.
Great, thank you all. Okay, so some ground rules. You may remember these from last time, just a refresher. We ask that you approach these meetings with creativity and collaboration, that you engage in thoughtful, honest, and respectful dialogue, which we don't expect anything different from you all, but we know these are really important decisions that we're talking about, so just wanted to make sure that we are honoring everyone's individual perspectives. Everyone shares ownership and responsibility in this process. Assume best intentions of all who are present. Recognize this process will require self-reflection, partnership, and compromise. This is a big conversation. We're not just talking about to build or not to build. There's a lot of different options in between, and so we want to keep open minds about all of those different options. Ask questions that you have for Vera, for Maggie, for Wendy, but also for each other. This is an opportunity for you all to learn about each other's work as well. And give all members an opportunity to weigh in. As I said, in going over the agenda, we will have time for community members. We're blocking off about half an hour. So we ask that if community members do have questions that you save them until the end. And hold each other accountable to these rules. If you feel like someone's not quite acting within these rules, maybe just give a friendly reminder about them. Anything else to add about that or questions? No? Okay. So, wanted to give a quick update about where we are in this process with you all and what we've been up to since we last met. So, as we shared last time, there are 3 phases to this work. The first is qualitative and quantitative data gathering. So this includes task force meetings. This is our second meeting. Town halls. We had 2 community town halls on our last visit. We will have 2 during this visit. Really an opportunity to hear from community and gather their thoughts. Meetings with jail staff. So on our last visit, we went to the downtown jail as well as Geiger and spent some time with the staff. Sparborough arranged for us to go to roll call yesterday at the downtown jail, so trying to hear as much as we can from the staff. Focus groups with incarcerated people. Tomorrow we will be doing focus groups at the downtown jail and at Geiger, 2 at each, so 1 group of men and 1 group of women at each of those facilities. And it's important for us to hear directly from those who are impacted by the jail about how things are going, what could be better, etc. And then the next phase of the work is data sharing, collective analysis, and forecasting. I would say we're kind of in a hybrid of phase 1 and 2. We're actually doing both at the same time, and that's great, that's okay. So today will be, as was mentioned earlier, Wendy will be sharing out her data findings. We're really hoping that you all will engage with that data and analyze it as well, ask questions that you have. And in the next visit that we make, Wendy will be sharing about her forecasting, and I'll allow her to share more about that in her presentation. And then this will all wrap up with recommendations from you all as a task force to the Board of County Commissioners about the future of the jail facilities, but also the larger criminal justice system, knowing that the jail is just one piece of that. So any questions about that? Yes, Curtis.
So when you were talking, you were saying that you talked to impacted, incarcerated people?
We will be tomorrow.
You will be, okay.
Yep.
So does that also include people in active or past reentry?
So we're going to be talking with folks in the jail. What's interesting, Maggie was going around the other day to recruit folks at the jail, and some of them were going to be getting out fairly quickly, so they wouldn't be able to participate in the jail, but they were asking about the community town halls. So I think we'll be getting some of those folks in the community town halls sharing their experiences.
Okay, so that would be just an immediate ask that I have, is that you also
Okay.
consult with people who have experienced reentry here in Spokane.
Okay, so they're currently in reentry, or they just have at any point?
At least some kind of touching that subject matter. So
Okay.
talking to the people who are currently incarcerated, but then also people who have experience or have had experience in reentry.
Yep, just making a note of that. Okay, thank you, Curtis. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this very, very quickly. We wanted to share back what we heard during our last visit. So you all will remember that we did a visioning activity where we talked about your vision for your work, for the community, for this collaborative, as well as thinking about if a criminal justice system were working ideally, what that would look like. And vision really helps you to think about where you are right now and where you want to go as a community. It also helps you to make tough decisions, but it helps you to think about which of the options in your decision will help you to get to your ultimate vision. So, and we ask these questions of you all, but the community as well. And so I know this is probably a little bit hard to see for some of you, but so what we did is we pulled out the themes that occurred most frequently in those, in the task force meeting, but as well as the community town halls. And so those that are larger appeared more in the conversations. So does anything jump out to you all? I mean, community certainly came up a lot, right? That's kind of at the center of all of it. It's the largest. Justice, equity.
Yeah.
Racial, yep. That sounds a little odd. It was with equity, but it split it up because they appeared separately as well. But yep.
Honesty's good.
Honesty. Restorative is another big one. Supportive. Accountability.
It's interesting because compassion is a little smaller.
Yeah. Yep.
But
it
it's
is.
a conflicting kind
Yep.
of a thing.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And it was interesting because there was a lot of overlap between what you all said and what the community said. Okay. So to the question about an ideal criminal justice system, again, there was a lot of overlap, what we heard here and what we heard in community. A lot of focus on treatment for mental health challenges, for substance use and addiction, a lot about safety. We heard a lot about safety in the jail, safety in courts, safety for victims and honoring their rights, being data-driven and evidence-based, and as well as bail and fines and fees reform. And I'm just flagging victims' rights and safety. We had a few slides last time that we didn't get to. We're going to address them this visit. We feel it's really important to center victims' desires and their vision in this conversation. So we'll be coming back to that in just a minute. So we also asked a set of questions of you all, task force members, community members, and jail staff. So we asked them if they had concerns about the current jail facilities. And the themes that emerged were probably not surprising. Overcrowding. We heard about dangerous conditions for incarcerated people and staff. The lack of direct supervision. There was a lot of conversation about this. People being locked down for many hours of the day. The population with mental health struggles. Lack of services around mental health and substance use. Lack of transparency, so there's kind of this feeling that the jail is a closed environment and people in the community don't really know what's happening there. And then that the current facilities are not cost effective. So we wanted to share a bit about the interviews that we had with jail staff, just so you can hear directly from them. So we asked them, what if anything is working well with the current facilities? And to be honest, this question really stumped them. They said things like, I can't think of anything working well. We just do the best we can with what we have. We asked them about the most significant challenges with the current facilities. They mentioned outdated, falling apart, overcrowded, dangerous, difficult on staff's mental health and morale. They talked about how all the services were downtown and having to shuttle people back and forth between Geiger is really challenging and time consuming. One person said, we make people worse, we create more problems. The staff don't know people because we never deal with them. And this goes back to that question of direct supervision. It was really interesting. We heard almost a nostalgia for days of the past when there was direct supervision, and being able to get to know the people in their care and custody and solve problems with them, where they feel like they just can't do that in the current situation. So we asked them, what opportunities are there for immediate fixes? Again, a bit of a question that stumped them. They've said, we've done everything we can, we do the best we can. Not sure taxpayers would be okay with $40 million to fix up old broken stuff. So then we asked them, well, what about longer term fixes? They mentioned needing more support staff, a return to direct supervision. We heard a lot about the community resource center, so a one-stop shop with resources, more programs. They felt like there used to be programs, but then staff has been laid off, so they don't have those as much. The mental health population, they said there should be something for them that is not incarceration. And so we asked them again, if the system were working ideally, what would that look like? And they said we would treat people humanely, but we can't because of the size of our staff. They said fewer frequent flyers, so people who are churning in and out of the jail on low-level charges, and programs for substance use, mental health, and violence.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yep. Was that direct supervision model changed because of budget cuts or because someone felt like it was a good idea to change the model?
Well, it changed because of overcrowding. That's why it changed it. The original design was one officer to 46 inmates up on the floor. And it would be an open environment. They were out from, they would get out at 8 in the morning, they'd be out of their cells until 11 o'clock at night when we get on the lockdown. Opportunity to, do whatever they want to, converse, play cards, watch TV, talk on the telephones, and then have the opportunity to talk to their support group throughout the day rather than just specific hours. When we went to overcrowding, we double bumped the cells upstairs. Some of you were on the tour, you got a good chance to take a look at that. And with that, only a portion of the floor could be out for a period of time, and then the other half of the floor has to be locked down during that period. So staff of 2 officers, 1 officer is out with whatever group is out. The second officer is doing continuous 30-minute rounds on the ones that are locked down. So the interaction, the face-to-face is missed there because there's just not opportunity to do it.
I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to walk you through the rest.
Hello everyone, good morning. Again, I'm Caitlin and I work with Liz at the Bureau Institute of Justice. I was curious real quick, can you raise your hand if you attended one of the town halls? Great, so maybe a third, and I just want to say, I would say about 80 to 90 people were at each one, is that right?
Altogether, there were 150 people over the course of 2 nights.
Okay, awesome. So what I am sharing with you, I think really represents a cross-section of Spokane. It was like a really diverse group, and people really shared different perspectives. So what we did at the town hall, one of the questions we asked folks is, where do you see solutions or opportunities? And this, actually, we had slightly different answers at the town hall than with this group, so we broke this into 2 slides. By and large, people were really interested in services and options that would keep people out of the system kind of at the front end. So expanding diversion, expanding the capacity of the future crisis stabilization facility, and also like CIT training for officers. Another thing people were really concerned with was the high rate of pretrial incarceration. People definitely expressed an interest in reducing the use of bail. and the number of people incarcerated. Some people even called for the end of pretrial incarceration. And we will talk about this a little bit later, maybe in a next meeting, but people also were kind of referencing the blueprint a lot and were interested in getting an update on what was happening with that. Here in this group, solutions were a little more specific, which is not surprising since you're all the experts. There was definitely an interest in expanding community supervision. By and large, many people were interested in the idea of a 24/7 court, expanding capacity to release people quickly from the jail who will ultimately be released anyway. There's a lot of talk about a community corrections center or community resource center. I do want to say that these things mean very different. These ideas mean very different things to different people. So when some people hear that, they think something more like this Envision Center where people can walk in and get services. When some people hear that, they really think a law facility that's much more like jail. So that's kind of forthcoming to hash out what that really looks like, but wanted to flag that for you. And then again, a real emphasis on using data to guide this process. We also asked, what would you advocate for regarding the future of jail facilities in Spokane? This chart, you see the more popular options on the top. I'd say especially from community members, people said, at this point, I'm not sure if a new jail is wise. We need to make this decision really thoughtfully. We know that there are reforms going on the ground. Maybe it makes more sense to see how those play out and what impact we can get from those. Community Resource Center was another theme. And then again, we see an interest in diversion and options, especially for people with mental health issues and substance abuse issues. There's some things that relate to the jail space as it is, and potentially there are tweaks that could be made there without the need of a new building, such as making it easier for families to visit and increasing space for attorneys to meet with their clients. And then finally, towards the bottom, there are some people who today are advocating for a larger jail. We asked all of you and community members, what does a healthy community look like? And by and large, people pointed to services that could support low-income people, people who are homeless, people with mental health issues. Lowering the number of crime victims was a big indicator for people that we are in a healthier community, and better partnerships between community members and law enforcement. Yeah, okay. Then we asked, how could the justice system support this vision? And we kind of see the same things again. People are interested in alternatives to incarceration, diversion programs, the Community Resource Center came up again, and more training for law enforcement and community corrections officers. Then we asked about what other community resources are needed to support this vision for a healthy community. And there was kind of a division here, and there were 3 different buckets. Some people felt strongly that the resources already exist here, but they need to be better coordinated and people just don't know about them. We need to be working to link people to services. Others said, well, resources exist, but some are low quality. There's not a lot of quality assurance, and that's an issue. And then others said, no, there are definitely gaps. And the gaps people pointed to are low-income housing, affordable childcare services, resources for parents, and treatment beds for people with substance use and mental health programs. So that's kind of where I'll stop right now with reflections of what we heard both from you and town halls. Are there any questions or comments about that, or any reflections from people who attended the town hall meetings?
I don't want to take up too much space, so I'll just try to make it quick. So my reflection is that when I hear the many pieces of this, that what it points to is that this is a long-term issue. This has been in effect for a while, and it has these multiple sections that have an impact in multiple arenas, which end up in our current jail as it operates, having this kind of an impact not only on the staff there, but that's an important piece of the staff in there, the human beings in there, right? As well as the population that they're there to steward and hopefully on some level serve, right? So when you just touched on these pieces, that's the track that I see. It's like, to be able to reduce that population, which is increased, we have this lack of resources or lack of connectivity on the outside that has allowed this to continue to the momentum that's got us to where we're at today.
Thank you. Other comments or reflections, especially from folks who were able to attend?
Yeah, I'll say, I was able to be at both of them, and one evening I was in a group with someone who's formerly incarcerated, a drug counselor, a detention services officer, and a law enforcement officer. And the exchange of information and sort of the cross-education within that group of sharing what everyone's experiences were and what the challenges that they faced included was a really powerful moment for me to sort of be a part of, but also for everyone in the group. And it's sort of similar to what I was talking about in terms of the jail tours, and I think what we're trying to do here. So I thought it was a really powerful educational opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll add that I was really interested in is there were definitely folks that came and said, like, I don't really know much about the criminal justice system. I don't really know what's going on in the jail. I just saw a flyer and thought I would go, and I really appreciate that for those people that showed up. And I also thought, like, oh, these town halls are such an important opportunity to educate people. So I'm really excited about this. And of course, we encourage you to attend and to send others. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and as Liz said, we had these slides last meeting, and we weren't able to get to them, but it's really important. So it's a little bit of a segue, but I want to spend a little time talking about victims and survivors in this process. I want to keep in mind to just anchor us in this, just like we can't look at someone and tell if someone is formerly incarcerated. We don't know who in this room has been a victim of violence or has a loved one who's been a victim of violence. This is sadly a common part of the American experience. So just want to bring that spirit to this. Let's not make assumptions about where someone is coming from in this. So pivoting to this, I do want to share some national data. And I know that national data can feel frustrating because it's not Spokane specific, and I acknowledge that. But I just wanted to show you this because I think it's really interesting, and I wanted to prompt our wheels to maybe think differently and think beyond our common assumptions. So this data comes from a survey of 800 victims across the country about their views on incarceration and community investment. By a margin of 3 to 1, the victims surveyed believe that prison is more likely to make people commit crimes than to rehabilitate them. This data, which I'm happy to share with you, also breaks down responses from Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, and these findings really hold across all political affiliations. 60% of victims prefer shorter sentences and increased spending. 60% of victims prefer shorter sentences and increased spending on prevention and rehabilitation. 83% are interested in investment in mental health, and 73% in drug treatment. And by a margin of 15 to 1, the victims surveyed in this were more interested in supporting education over incarceration. And so this is obviously victims and survivors are not a monolith, and these are generalizations. But I bring this to say I want us to think really creatively about how this group and the criminal justice system can better meet the needs of survivors. I want to unpack this a little bit and first start off by sharing that nationally, less than 10% of victims and survivors ever access a victim service agency or get the help they need. There's a huge gap in services. Only about half of people who have been harmed report this crime to police, but even those who do report are not likely to get services. We're talking about only 13% of victims. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I do that. Thank you. Does anyone want to repeat what I just said? We're good? Okay. So I'm on a project at Vera right now, in addition to my work in Spokane, to figure out how do we close this gap? Like, what are we going to do with this 90% of survivors who aren't getting their needs met? And the federal government decided that in order to help close this gap, there are a couple communities that we really need to focus on, and these are folks who are more likely to survive and witness violence and less likely to get services. These include low-income people, especially people with an annual income of under $25,000, LGBTQ people, people with disabilities and deaf people, immigrants, and I'll add in here also people who don't speak English, people of color, and formerly incarcerated people. So I'm part of this multi-year project to try to close these gaps. So I wanted also to pause here and say, what else, if you remember my slides from last time, what else does this group of survivors like have in common? What do these identities make you think of?
Yeah, definitely need you to speak up. on
Okay,
that one.
okay, thank you. So what I was saying is these are also folks who are likely to be overrepresented in jails, and I showed slides on that last time. My suggestion is not that jail can be the only place to link people to victim services, but it could be an avenue for that.
And mental illness needs to be in that list.
It does.
They are definitely at higher risk for
Yeah, thank you. And in some categories, we put people with mental illness as a psychiatric disability, so we can link that in there.
Drug abuse runs through every one of those.
Yeah, so we see some definitely intersecting, right? Yeah, thank you. Any other reflections on that before I move on to my next slide? Okay, so in order to help close these gaps and figure out how we can get more survivors the services they need, I was part of a national needs assessment where we talked with over 2,000 victims, survivors, and the people working with them about how can we link people to services. So this included 118 informational interviews, 50 listening sessions, and we surveyed 15,000 people. And a couple common themes came up. One is that there might be a mistrust of mainstream services or victim services if they're located in the criminal justice system. A large one is that victim service providers may not have good working relationships with the type of community organizations that are serving the types of survivors who aren't getting linked to services. Enhancing partnerships was really the biggest finding, and then also lack of awareness that these services exist and how do I go about them. So I wanted to throw this to the group. When we talk about subcommittees, I just want you to keep this in mind. After talking with over 2,000 people, no one really said what would have helped me is a bigger jail. I'm not saying that there's not a place and a time for incarceration, and certainly in moments of crisis that can help make people feel safer. But unless we really build in intentional processes to link victims and survivors to services in the community, I think we're missing a lot of folks. Yeah.
So just a question on that note, because I've looked, and so I just, again, thinking, okay, is there some information out there that I'm not aware of? Because I've been digging for a couple of years now. Is there any evidence-based process that showed that a bigger jail makes a community safer anywhere that you've encountered?
I'm gonna say no. What would you guys say?
Not that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just bring up that we have to keep in mind the conditions of confinement that we have now.
Sure, yeah.
So a broad question like a bigger jail is pretty broad. What we need to do is take care of the conditions that are going on right now. And if that means expanded bed space, that's what it means, in my opinion.
So, Mike, and if I can, and thank you for that, what I was really kind of pointing at is that the process of just a bigger facility by itself without wraparound services and other intersecting needs and things done in and around the community, that bigger by itself does not equal safer by itself.
Right. And actually what we're seeing in a lot of communities as there's a lot of concern that as conversations around lowering the number of people in the jail that crime would go up. And we're actually seeing the opposite in a lot of communities. As they're reducing the number of people in jail, crime is not going up, it's actually going down. And we are nationally on a downward trend.
Yeah.
I think something, when you talk about victims' perspectives and what they need, it's important to keep in mind that victims are not necessarily separate from defendants and offenders. A lot of times they're the same people, and it's just part of what they live with. On a daily basis, they may be charged with a crime and be the victim of a crime.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reminding us of that. And formerly incarcerated folks are on this list, and I would add currently incarcerated people as well. So again, I think that's a really important space to think about how we support people. Can we integrate linkages to victim services as part of the reentry process? But I also don't want to forget about survivors who are not actively involved in the criminal justice system. But thank you for bringing that. I mean, statistics really show, especially with women, definitely 90 to 100% of women in jail are also survivors. Okay.
You know, I would also add to the conversation this whole idea of diversion. And how do we work with individuals within our community with partnerships with mental health and substance and law enforcement to see how can we divert them so that they don't even enter into our jails.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, the things that I've seen too in basically ORing people, releasing them on their own recognizance by the bail project, bailing them out, and then connecting them with services. Like primarily the best thing that I've seen that prevents people from being able to get bail is their previous failure to appear rate. And then in that failure to appear rate, folks just don't have a ride. Folks lost their backpack and don't remember their court dates. They don't know who their attorney is. So, you know, bringing it back, you know, I think that, you know, like I know that the data in the jail shows that, you know, there's like 50% people get OR'd and then 50% of them don't return back to court. Well, ours is greater than that, our return rate, just by supporting them with a ride and a real notification. So, I don't know, just taking it back like that, and it's really true that we have lots of folks that we see who are you know, being charged with crimes and are on the other side are victims too, and they really just simply have no idea how to access. There are even services for them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think I'm going to end there right now. I certainly hope that this is a continuing conversation. Again, I'm part of a team that's really trying to puzzle out this issue. I mean, how do we reduce that 90% piece of survivors that aren't getting services? And it's really tricky. But I would love for this group, and then when we break into subcommittees, maybe one of those groups, kind of explore this. What else can be done here to get people the help that they need, including people who are also defendants in the criminal justice system? All right, Maggie.
Great. So, in addition to hearing an interest from community members about making sure victims are safe, we also heard interest in making sure that we were reviewing the blueprint for reforms and considering whatever recommendations were made in that document. So for those of you who might not know, but I think most of you in this room do know, this was a document that was published in 2013 by a 3-member criminal justice commission, and it provided roughly 43 different recommendations, sort of categorized in different areas across the criminal justice system. So this is something that helped provide some context and framing for work that we were doing. And I just want to point out that we heard this loud and clear, and we are actually already working on reviewing our progress in the different recommendations, and so we hope to have additional detailed information at a future meeting. It's important to keep in mind that the recommendations that were made, some of them we have completed, and some of them are in progress, and then others we might have taken a look at and had to tweak because just in sort of the logistical reality of local government, we couldn't sort of implement it to a T as it was described in the black letter of the document. So things like expanded CIT teams, Jan Dobbs from Frontier Behavioral Health has been a huge partner in that. That was a recommendation that was included in the blueprint and has been implemented. The mental health crisis stabilization facility has overlap with the blueprint recommendations, and that's in progress. And then there are other initiatives that were not even mentioned in the blueprint that we've also pursued and implemented. For instance, we have a new pilot program with our pretrial services office to put a clinician in there to do a bail review for folks with mental health issues. And that's just one of many. So we are looking, we definitely want to be deliberate and thoughtful about what else we can do and where there's opportunities for additional efforts, because as Vera continues to stress, this is a system. There is a need in our jail right now, but that is just one point across the criminal justice system, and it's sort of the receptacle for a lot of other issues that we can address. So That's just a little teaser for now, but want to let folks know that we noted that in the town halls as well. Let's take, okay, so now this is a natural stopping point. We can switch our PowerPoint presentation.
I need your friend.
So go empty your brains, take a 5-minute break, and then come back for some, ready for some data analysis.
My brain's already empty.
All right, we're gonna reconvene. So grab a cookie and then come back to the table, please. So we are shifting from our more qualitative data review into our quantitative data. Spoiler alert, we don't have forecasts done today, but that's what JFA is working on, so that will be here for a future meeting. But we do have Wendy Ware here, who is an expert in jail forecasting, and so we're really fortunate to have her start drilling down into our local population. There was a big interest our last meeting to understand what our local jail looked like. We had some data, but mostly it was national trends. And so this is an opportunity for us to really get a better picture of what our jail population currently looks like. So with that, Wendy, we turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Wendy Ware. I'm from the JFA Institute, and we are a national nonprofit organization that provides research-based statistics services to state and local jurisdictions. Okay. Right now, we are actively working in 25 jails across the country, doing very similar work: data analysis, forecasting, risk assessment, a whole classification, a whole variety of things. So we have some perspective about what's going on nationally, and I'm going to share some of that with you today as we go through some of the Spokane specific data. It's not a judgment, it's not a recommendation, it's an observation for further discussion by this group. Okay, a little bit about myself. I am a forecasting and analysis specialist. For the past 25 years, I've been working exclusively in criminal justice statistics and forecasting. So hopefully I know what I'm talking about. I actually do know what I'm talking about. So that should give you some confidence about what you're going to see. Our approach to forecasting is something I want to talk a little bit about. And it's one of the reasons that we've broken down into a data presentation, and then we're going to come back with a forecast presentation. A lot of the forecasts you see and a lot of the forecasters who do correctional populations will just do a statistical prediction model based on your ADP. Okay? So what's the population been doing in the past? What's it going to do in the future? We actually take a larger approach. We build a simulation model. Okay? So what we do first is analyze your population, who's in the jail right now, how you're using your jail, what does the profile of those individuals look like. We also look at who flows through your jail on the most recent 6 months to 1 year period, depending on data availability. Okay, so a population that sits in the jail looks very different than a population that flows through the jail. Okay, you have a lot of people that flow through very quickly. Here in Spokane, as you'll see, you have a lot of people who come in and go in 24 hours. Okay, then you have another group of individuals who sit in the jail, awaiting disposition for the most part. Okay, so when we build a simulation model, we break down all those populations and analyze them, present that data to you. Okay, so you can see what your population is doing. Hopefully this information will then lead into, and we're working with Bureau on their effort in terms of your data-driven initiatives. Okay? Your populations that you want to serve more. Talking about diversion a little earlier. Where's that potential? What populations would that serve? Okay? So when we build a simulation model, we get aggregate level data on usually the last 5 to 6 years. County population, are you growing? Are you shrinking? What do bookings look like? What's length of stay look like? And we're going to go through that today. Okay? Then we're going to break down those two populations I talked about. Those that sit in the jail, what's the population in jail look like right now? And then what about those who come and go quickly? Okay, so we're going to talk about all that. I want to set you up so that you know. Probably don't have a lot of data experts in here, so I'm gonna go as slow as necessary. Please feel free to ask questions. There's a lot to go over. I might cut you off if it gets a little long, okay? Any questions? All right,
For
let's do
folks
it.
here in the back? Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. So first, we're going to talk about the Spokane County resident population. The resident population in total is represented on the blue bars. The males ages 15 to 34 is represented on the second axis with the line. That is what we consider in the criminal justice community your at-risk population. Okay, this is your crime-committing prone population. Okay. Make sure I get my numbers right. As you see, over this 6-year period, your resident population is growing an average of 1.3% per year. Your at-risk population, very close to that. Nationally, the U.S. population during that time period is only growing by 0.8%. Okay, so you're growing faster than the U.S. Washington State, on the other hand, during this period is growing by 1.5%. Okay, so you're not quite matching the state growth rate, but you're higher than the U.S. Okay? Makes sense? So you have an expanding community. Let's look at the people coming into the jail. Okay, so this is jail bookings. These are your jail booking numbers for the past 5 years. Okay? If we exclude 2014, just look at the last 4 years, you have basically a flat trend in terms of volume and not people, volume of admissions into the jail. Okay? We'll break this down a little further, but say for example this 20,000 does not represent 20,000 people. These are booking events. Okay? So we've got slightly a bit of a flat trend. You did have a slight increase in 2018, but you had a decrease in 2017. If we were to look at this at the whole as a trend forecaster, we'd say this is a pretty flat trend. Okay? The females, and we break down females and males, because again, our job is to provide you with a forecast that's useful. And as my jail people know here, female populations and male populations are housed separately. You have to house them separately. You have to plan for them separately. So a lot of our numbers are going to be broken out by gender. Okay? There's a similar growth rate for males and females. So we're, in this flat, we're not seeing any sort of shifting or differentiation between the two. Okay? Jail bookings times length of stay equals ADP. Yep.
Wendy, is there a racial disaggregation?
We're gonna get to it.
All right.
Hold tight. I do want to say, so we're providing sort of an overview of everything. As we get more into the case level data and into the specifics, you may say, oh, well, can I get FTAs by charge level? We can do that. We haven't done it here because it's so detailed, but we can report back to you on more specific things like that.
Yeah, going back to your
Yep.
population.
The bookings?
No, just the overall population and growth rate for the community. You've averaged it out over 5 years, but if you just take the growth that we've had in the last 2 years, which was, we're experiencing a pretty significant growth rate right now. We're actually just a little under 2%. And how long that maintains, you know, we went from 505 to 514. We'll find out next year what that 514 number gets increased to. But how does that impact your analysis, the fact that we're growing faster?
We will build that into our forecast
Okay.
assumptions.
Great.
So that's what I wanted to say. So we're sort of presenting the data,
Okay.
and when we do our forecast, we're going to give you one forecast that says if you don't do anything different, here's the population to expect. Okay? It will factor in the future county growth. This is a historical.
Okay.
And then the census produces forecasted county growth as well.
Right.
They do it by state. We'll talk to your state demographer and see if we can get more detail. We'll build that in. We'll build in your historical crime rates and your arrest rates and your booking rates to see if there's actually a correlation between the county population and those things. I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, there's usually not.
Yeah.
Okay. But we will take a look at that.
Okay.
And I agree, you have a faster growing rate in these years. To compare it nationally, we have to average it out because the census does it every 8 years.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so as I was saying, booking times length of stay equals population. So those are your three big factors that determine a jail population. Number of people coming in, how long they're gonna serve is gonna equal the ADP, okay? The blue bars represent the average ADP for each year, and the orange line represents length of stay, okay? Similar to bookings, your jail population, well, it's fluctuated a little bit, and it was trending up into 2018. It's a little bit down in 2019. It's actually pretty stable as well, okay? Some of that is your space constraints, for sure, okay? If you only have a certain amount to house people, you're gonna let them out, okay? Your average length of stay fluctuates a little bit, and that's usually controlled by space constraints if you have it, or just general practice, okay? Okay, back to males and females. So that was total. Males and females, again, look very different. We look at their trends different. This is the male ADP and length of stay. Males do have a longer length of stay than females, okay? This is typical. It's not unheard of. It's what we see all over, okay? It's a product of males usually having longer criminal histories, having more severe charges, et cetera, et cetera. So, to look at the females, you see their length of stay is almost half. It's a little over half of what it is for males. Okay? Okay. Not news to anyone. Let's talk about race. So if we look at the ADP by race, there's a couple things I want to point out. It's a lot of bars, it's a little confusing, and I do want to note that in 2014 and 2015, there's a lot of missings there, so I wouldn't say that it's a people of color. If we look at the percentages, and this is your sitting jail population, so your ADP. One thing I want to note, in 2016, 25% of your sitting jail population was people of color. In 2019, and that's through May 31st, it's 30%. Okay? So the proportion of people of color in the jail is going up the last 3 years alone. Okay? Criminologists talk a lot about things called incarceration rates, okay? This is a rate per 100,000 residents that are in the jail population, okay? So for white, it's 165 white residents are in the jail per 100,000 white residents in the community, okay? For black, it's 2,138.
Can you say that again?
For black, it's 2,138 residents, black residents in the community are in the jail per 100,000 residents. Okay, Hispanic is 254, Native American is 1,071, and again, there's other categories undetermined or missing, okay? This is significant, okay? But I will say it is not that much different than what we see around the country. Okay, but this is significant. The Native American population is obviously unique to more of the western states and the Midwest, northern states where there's a large Native American population. Okay, but these are your incarceration rates by race. Silence. Okay. One other thing globally I want to talk about when we talk about the jail population before we get into the nitty-gritty is something called a peaking factor. And I'm not sure this has been discussed or explained to this group before, but when we look at a jail population, we talk about ADP, okay? Average daily population for the year, okay? Anyone who's worked in a jail, been in a jail, knows about a jail, knows that that's not the number you hit even consistently on a daily basis. It goes up and down pretty significantly with daily releases, midnight, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do when we do a jail forecast is we determine a low and a high peaking factor, okay? So then when you get your number that shows, okay, I expect to be here in 2021, I could be as low as X, I could be as high as this. So if a decision is made to build a new jail, whatever size, you wanna factor in, especially the high peaking factor, so that you are actively planning for as many people as you're gonna have, okay? And we were able to determine these, thanks again to Diane and Maggie and the jail staff, from all your daily counts for all these years, okay? I do wanna note that 2017 and 2018, we saw a really big increase, particularly in the high peaking factor, which seems to have leveled out in 2019. Okay, yeah?
And hey, Wendy, so just again for my general understanding, so this is as, this projection, this high peaking factor, low peaking factor is as we currently operate.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So again, when we come back and we give you your forecast, we're gonna have a baseline, which says if you don't do anything different, this is what you can expect in the future. You're not gonna pursue any new reforms. We will build in the ones that are currently operating, but if there's ones in the pipeline that aren't showing up in the data, they won't be in what we would call our baseline forecast. The baseline forecast will have this peaking factor applied. Okay? There's also something called a classification peaking factor, which we'll talk to the jail about in terms of space, minimum, medium, maximum beds. You have to have a certain leeway there, because it's not just how many beds, it's what type of beds. Okay, so we'll look at that too. Yep.
So I'm understanding.
Yep.
In 2019, does that 9% peaking mean it would be 9% higher than the 927
Correct.
at some point?
Correct.
6% lower.
Correct.
That's the range then between.
Correct. Correct. Okay, and so when you're thinking about even renovating a jail, building a jail, any sort of space, you always build to the ADP plus the high peaking factor. You always plan for that, so that you're not short-bedded at midnight. Okay? Okay, so now we're gonna get into, from sort of a high-level aggregate number here, number there, we're gonna get into the specifics of the jail population, okay? And so as I said, we got a case-level data file on April 30th, 2019 of everyone that was sitting in the jail, okay? So we have every record for everyone. She's in the back, she can't hear me, you guys need a mic. So we take that data and we crunch it, and as I said again, we're presenting sort of a high level. We got some advice from Maggie and her staff about what's important for Spokane, and we're providing what we can, okay, to tell you who's in your jail. In your jail on April 30th, you have about 87% male, 13% female, okay? That's pretty standard. We usually see an 85-15 split, males and females in jails across the country, okay? If we look at the age of everyone sitting in jail, 40% of your population is 25 to 34, okay? And your average age of sitting in the jail is about 36 and a half years, okay? So again, profiling, what does sort of an average jail inmate look like, okay? 17 to 24 is sort of your younger offenders, about 11%. The other large group, 35 to 44, okay? So that 17 to 35 ties back to that at-risk population I talked about in the community. Okay, that's why we sort of highlight these things. Okay?
How does that compare to national trends?
This is pretty standard. This is pretty standard. We can see the 25 to 34 up to about 45%, but this is well within the range of what we see. We do see in certain jails, depending on state legislation, depending on the county's preference, we can see this younger group much higher as well. And we do see some juveniles in adult jail around the country, but we don't have any here. Yeah.
Wendy, what's the average incoming inmate population as opposed to the outgoing population?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
We're gonna get to that. Guys are jumping the gun. All right, let's talk about the race. So sitting in the jail, 70% of the population is white. Okay? 12% black, 8% Hispanic, 7% Native American, and then there's that other. Okay? So even though, and I want to sort of tie it back to those incarceration rates I talked about, even though it's a low percentage of the jail, when we mirror that with the population of the community, it's quite high. Okay? Where are they coming from? How are they getting to the jail? So this is, again, the April 30th population broken down by where they're coming. Who's brought them to the jail? Spokane County, Spokane City, Spokane Valley, federal and state and other. And I want to pause here and talk about the federal and state offenders for a bit, because I know that they're a focus here. When we do our forecast, we actually do our forecast of a lot of different groups. Okay, we don't actually produce one forecast. We're actually going to produce about 25. Okay, and the federal and state are their own forecasting group. Okay, so they're not intermingled with our other assumptions. And it's actually a policy decision by the county as to how many federal and state offenders you have. Okay, so that is something that I want to assure everyone that is not sort of built into your alternatives, not built into your forecast. It's its own forecast and line item. Okay, so you'll see them separated as we go through our slides. Okay, let's talk about legal status of the sitting jail population. Legal status, pretrial, sentence. Again, there's those holds, federal and other, that we've broken out here for you. Again, they're separate. 70% of your population is pretrial, 17% is sentence. Is this comparable? I would say it's a little low. Nationally, we see pretrial populations about 85%. Okay, some of that. Let me stop you. Let me just hold on that. It can be a bit misleading because a lot of states, Arkansas, Louisiana, a lot of the southern states with state jail backup, where they will house state offenders in the jail for up to 2 years, skew their percentages. Okay, so they're sentenced people, they're sitting there, they're serving a state sentence basically. Okay, so I think this number is actually quite high for your population and for how what the jurisdictional laws here. I think this population is quite high. Yeah.
Is there information available for the years preceding 2019 with that same graph?
Yes, I believe we can get that. Yeah.
So
Do you have
Yeah.
Do you have this data available by charge type? Difference between at least felony and misdemeanor?
I can do that. I don't have it available. Yep.
On the pretrial numbers, are there any distinctions between pretrial prior to first appearance and then those just waiting for their actual trial that didn't qualify for bail or can't bond out?
I'm looking at Diane. I don't think that our data is capable of that.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
If on the pretrial numbers, you're able to make a distinction between those that have not had their first appearance yet, so maybe they just got arrested and they're just waiting for a judge to determine if they can OR or bond out or versus waiting for their actual trial.
We have data that looks at book and releases at the jail, but at this point we don't have access to data showing who is waiting those 72 hours for their first appearance.
We could tell you how many of those pretrial people, how long they've served to date. So if they've been in 8 hours, if they've been in 72 hours, but it's the court date that we don't have access to with this data.
So you can have an average kind of stay for the pretrial?
Correct, yes, absolutely. And we actually, there's a slide coming up with that for total, just not by pretrial.
I was, Maggie, if we could get for previous years, that would be great.
Okay.
To see how we're doing now.
Got it.
Right,
Well,
right,
and then we-
And that speaks to what my question was, is that information available and can we get that?
It's not a part of this, so we'll take down all of the interest in different data points, and we'll have to probably triage and see what's most important based on consensus here or sort of informing future future conversations and then prioritize those, just based on capacity, but we're completely committed to increasing data analysis and transparency on
Well,
that.
I think as you'll see, you know, and working with Vera and everything that's coming up in the town halls and in this group, the pretrial population, I think, is where a lot of the focus is gonna be, in terms of the needs and alternatives, so I think this is a very important discussion, yeah.
Does your data include either contract or privatized jails in addition to municipal or other jurisdiction jails?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Are you talking about in other jurisdictions where they've done analysis?
Well, in national trends and things
Oh.
like that, there are a number of states that allow
Yes.
for privatized jails and stuff, which the state of Washington doesn't do. And I
Yes.
know that there's different motivations with regard to privatized jails as opposed to municipal jails.
I would have to look into it,
Okay.
I'd say at the ready.
All right.
And then what we've seen, too, with folks sitting pretrial, like 90% of them can't afford a bail. They just can't afford the bail. And that's why they're still
I do
sitting.
have a slide that breaks down this pretrial population by bail amount, which I think you'll find enlightening, yes.
Or continuances included in the pretrial population?
Correct, yes.
And
Yes.
do you have numbers on that in terms of how many continuances does the average inmate have prior to going to trial?
Not in my data.
We're working right now with the different courts to try and figure out how we can help digest that information. So we're interested in as well. Case processing is a big push across all 3 courts, and so hopefully we can get that information soon and then share it out once we have it. But I don't think we have access to it at this point, Judge.
Can you break that down by jurisdiction as well?
Which piece?
Is legal status by charge
Yeah.
and jurisdiction or court?
Nope. Sparker?
Yes, I was just gonna say, so you could kind of back into it, Carrie, because first appearances usually take place 24 hours after they're booked in. If they're a felon, they have 72 hours for the prosecutor to press charges. So if you look at the overall length of stay, you can figure that process out pretty close to this case processing after that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we can do that, we could do like the stay chunks and sort of back into it that way, I think.
A little anecdotal, but it's close.
One of the other things that usually affects pretrial release and time spent in pretrial before cases are cleared is number of charges a defendant has.
Like current charges or
Yes.
over, like history?
They're current charges. Okay, so your average number of charges is 4.2, median is 3, because we do the median so you can sort of see what the middle is. This is high. Okay, we usually see an average in jails of about 2.5. Okay? 27% of your sitting jail population, again, we're gonna look at this chart, all of these charts we're gonna look at again in the release population or the flow. So, and I'll point out where they're different. 27% of your sitting jail population only have 1 charge. Okay, 29% have 5 or more. Okay, you would expect in the jail population, the largest group to be your higher number of charges. Okay, this is quite large. Okay.
Is there any distinction between new charges and warrant charges? In there? I didn't read
Yeah,
it.
go ahead. Sorry. No, I don't, and I don't want you to. Go ahead.
Just what you just distinguished between felonies and.
Correct.
Okay, so you'll see
Absolutely.
it, that's a felony.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about number of charges by our racial groups. Okay? You can sort of ignore the bars. This is sort of where the action is at in terms of average number of charges by racial breakdown. You see white and black about the same. Okay? In terms of average number of charges. Hispanic is much lower. And again, this is for your sitting jail population. Okay? 51% of the Hispanic population sitting in the jail today only have one charge. Okay, so if I'm here to sort of point out what looks different, where some inconsistencies are, in this Hispanic population is where it is. Now, I do want to say Hispanic is an ethnicity and a race. The way we have done it in order to present it, Hispanic is the top or overrated, okay?
It's the top what?
It's the top hierarchy in our order. So if you're a white Hispanic, a black Hispanic, a Native American Hispanic, you're Hispanic in this chart, okay? Your average number of charges for Native Americans is also slightly lower than our black and white races, but above Hispanic, okay? So I would say the takeaway here is your Hispanic and Native American population sitting in the jail is for one or fewer charges. One charge, usually two or fewer charges, okay? Let's talk about bond amount. Again, this is the total population, so this does include our pretrial. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to go to the pretrial slide. But 41% of the sitting jail population has no bond. The no bond category is very confusing for us in our data, so I wouldn't rely so much on it. Okay, it can be missing, it can be no bond. It's a gray area for us, and it wasn't one we were able to clean up.
Sentence population as well is included
Correct.
in
It's
that,
also
so.
no bond. Okay, the bond amounts are solid. And if we look at the sitting pretrial population, over 40% of the sitting pretrial population is bond over $10,000. Yeah.
So I guess this is pre-trial, correct?
Correct. This is just pre-trial.
So in Washington State, correct me if I'm wrong, but every offense is bondable except for capital offenses and three-strike offenses, correct? So 23% of the people in our jail are capital offenses or three-strike offenses?
No, that includes a mix of different categories, so it can be sentence population.
No, this is pre-trial.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong slide. So that one, there was some information and data that I think we struggled to validate, and then, so that also includes sort of what would show up as null, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Diane? So as Wendy was saying, it's not, the no bond category is just something that we couldn't identify which bond category to put it in, and so it's not reliable, as she was saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's a bit misleading. The ones with bond amounts are not misleading. And so we're pretty comfortable with that, yeah.
I was gonna say, a lot of the no bond, are the whole criminal jurisdiction and some of the other areas that show up in that category.
Yeah, it includes whole sentence, well, not sentence on this, but non-bondable offenses are in that no bond. But this is large. 40% of your sitting pretrial population, that's 70% from the first pie that we talked about, have a bond over $10,000. Okay? You see only 10% of the pretrial population has bonds $1,000 and under, 17% 1 to 5. Then you've got your 10% 5 to 10. Okay? These are high bond amounts for people sitting in jail, comparatively. Yeah. So, yeah.
I have to ask. So, Wendy, have you looked at any of the data? And I'm imagining it's probably very hard to get, or it's not available on income brackets of folks in jail.
Yeah, we don't. That's not in the data that we have
Unless we're
available,
gathering that.
unfortunately.
One thing we've talked about looking at is capturing how many individuals sitting in jail are represented by a public defender as a
Yeah, that
proxy
would
for
be a
getting
good
at it.
indicator.
So that's
Yeah.
something we're looking into.
At the city, 97% are eligible, and we have all of the income data.
Great.
Did you say in the city cases, 97% of people are eligible for a public defender?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, see, that might be a way to sort of get at that in a general sense.
Overall, street.
Okay. Here's another great one. Let's talk about what their most serious charge is. Again, sitting jail population on our April 30th snapshot. At that point, the population was 976, so you can see where that peaking factor comes in terms of slightly higher than what our ADP is. Okay, so we have followed the hierarchy. We have felony, misdemeanor, and then our different categories to label them by their most serious charge, okay? As we saw from before, the average number of charges is 4.4, so there are, even though I may have labeled one individual serious violent, they could have 3 other charges sitting behind it, okay? But in order to just get a look at things, we've broken them down into these categories. Now there's 3 things I want to highlight. And that is your felony controlled substance, 200 people sitting in the jail, 21% of your jail population. Their most serious charge is controlled substance. Of this 201, 170 of them are for possession only. Not possession.
107.
70 are for possession only. Not possession with intent, possession only. Okay? That is high compared to what we see nationally. Now that doesn't mean they don't have 3 other misdemeanors behind it, but their most serious charge, based on the hierarchy we established with the county, is possession. Okay? Similarly, for the gross misdemeanor and the other misdemeanor, that's their most serious, is a gross misdemeanor. That doesn't mean they don't have 5 gross misdemeanors, but their most serious is a gross misdemeanor. So back to the discussion earlier about pretrial diversion, alternatives to incarceration, what is the need, where are the targeted population? This is where you would go. Similarly with your other nonviolent, there could be some categories in there. Yeah.
The other nonviolent is stuff like theft or, I don't know, property crimes primarily, right?
They're low-level property crimes.
Well, that kind of gives life to the Spokane doesn't prosecute property crimes.
But I do want to note, I don't want this to come across as, oh, this is easy, because I want to go back to that number of charges slide that we saw. Okay, yeah.
So if I'm reading this correctly,
Yep.
26% is violent, sex, or other violent.
Yes.
So the remainder is what would be characterized as a nonviolent offense.
As a, yes.
Right?
Yep.
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Simply because assault, domestic violence is a misdemeanor. And
There are some assault in the gross misdemeanor, 3rd and 4th degree assaults in the gross misdemeanor category.
Right.
So you'd have to break down.
We
misdemeanors
can
more, okay.
break it down further. We would need some direction as to specifically what you're looking for. And as this group's discussion goes into what can we do, what do we want to do, those questions should be plentiful. Because as I said, you can't, if you were to create a diversion program simply for possession, it's not going to be first time, single, simple possession. He's going to have 3 FTAs behind it. He may have some other assaults, misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, assault 3rd. He may have some property crimes. It's going to take some discussion and some harder decisions in that. Yeah.
And I just want to point out too that in the real world, a little bit in the real world, heavily addicted people that are a population that has serious substance use disorder problems, they're not probably going to be hanging out a lot in the misdemeanor realm. They're going to be in some of the what's classified as some of the violent stuff, or because that's what addiction does. So I just want to make that distinction real quick, that as we start really kind of looking at this, we look at it from a realistic perspective. If you talk to anybody in the recovery community, that's what's up.
I don't know if there's really data that supports
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I think that we would not want to make that generalization that individuals who are addicted are the ones that are committing violent felonies.
No, what I'm saying, and what I'm addressing very specifically, that as we're looking at the behaviors of the mutagenic stuff, the issues behind the justice-involved behavior, that drug addiction has a tendency to be very foundational in a lot of that, and people that have that track are also going to be committing some aspect that is perceived as violent.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, and
Okay,
again, I'm going to say that that's not going to be true.
Yeah, that's a generalization I think is unfair and not supported.
You know, potentially in the homeless population, committing crimes such as trespassing and trying to find some place to sleep for the night, or crimes of theft or
sit in line, yeah.
to support their addiction.
So I think, as Wendy was saying, that we can drill down into the charges on a more granular level, but it is complicated because we have to figure out how we're going to make that into sort of a list and a hierarchy, and so that's something that is going to be on us to do moving forward if we want that information, and then we can get data to sort of help us understand on a more granular level who we're seeing.
I think part of the value in it too would just be how it influences policy to know that a person with a controlled substance charge also has a misdemeanor violent charge and maybe disqualify them from a program that would otherwise be beneficial.
Absolutely, I've seen so many jurisdictions try to create a diversionary program, and then the list is so subjective. They haven't done their research ahead of time. No one qualifies for it. I mean, I've seen that countless times.
So I was just gonna say, we keep bringing up the 5 or more charges of it. Would that be, and maybe you covered in here, is that a reflection of recidivism? Or is it a reflection of 5 charges of that on the spot?
I can't say for, it could be either.
Okay.
I might be able to look at the charge date and see if it's 5 crimes with 1 incident, or if it's older crimes that
So
are
that's
tagging
right.
along.
So the sitting population has 5 or more charges.
Yes.
Is that a reflection of recidivism? Or is it they got charged with 5 charges?
They're being charged 5 times for an incident, yes. I'd have to look into that, I can't say for sure right now.
Sandy Williams has a question.
Oh, yes, sorry,
I have a question. If you have either this slide, this one, or the previous one, which was on the Mount retrial, either of those are disaggregated by race?
It can be, it's not currently.
Definitely the bond amount.
Take another stab at my question. Is there any breakout of how many of those charges are by warrant or they're new probable cause charges?
So I don't have the FTAs on this file. I have it on my release file. So when I get to the FTA, we can talk about it more then. It's not available on this data set, but it's available on another one. So we can back into it.
From a policy perspective, I think that's important.
I agree. I agree. That's why I said, I don't know how many of these controlled substance possession cases have 3 FTAs as well.
But to follow up on your question, does that file include FTAs or is that excluding FTAs?
I think the file that they have access to, booking the admissions into jail only captured so much information, and so Wendy used that for what she could, and then used the releases from jail to capture anything else that wasn't in that. So looking at admissions, but also looking at release data, if that makes sense.
But that number should include the 4 or more, yeah. Go ahead.
I had just another question here would be helpful again from a policy because, and that is breaking out the misdemeanors, both the gross and the others, from municipal court versus district court.
Wouldn't the piece about that I mentioned earlier with about half people returning back to court, wouldn't that be helpful in what you're trying to discern?
Sometimes we have a problem with case processing where someone is arrested multiple times for one case.
Right.
And so if we can get our arms wrapped around case processing and not have the FTA after FTA after FTA, we can drive this number. But if we don't know either new charges or recycling the old charges, it's hard to make that analysis.
I just wanted to note that none of the charges that are on there will be, like, you don't sit in jail on a charge called FTA. When you go back to jail, you are just still charged with the initial charge. the FTA is just a consideration, on bail amount or release.
And I have one more thing, and I'll just try to make it brief. So I absolutely disagree with the statement made that what I said was a generalization, because the reality is when you're dealing with somebody that has a co-occurring disorder, they are probably not the easiest to handle, and there's gonna be some kind of violent label that is occasionally or maybe even frequently attached to it. And I think that's kind of a larger conversation about how we actually view our justice-involved population and what, some of the nuances of that. And part of that is that I know that the people that I've engaged with that have serious substance use disorders, they don't have a tendency to be the nicest, coming from hey, I'm sitting here, I'm addicted to crack cocaine, or I'm addicted to meth, and I'm just gonna be nice about it. So there's this perception that has to be challenged along the way as we move into this, and I think that's what I'm really kind of pointing to is how do we define that, and how do we go into those deeper sections of what this really means.
And there's levels of addiction. I mean, I
Yeah, well, I want to
serious
challenge
substance,
the perception that people who are addicted are mean. Or
Like,
violent.
how much of that ties into the criminalization of a disease, of a disorder?
Yes, that's where I'm going.
So, to just make an assumption without, data that supports that, I think is a very dangerous, and harmful tactic that could potentially harm, communities that are experiencing addiction.
Well, that's also saying like people that, persons of color have been saying, hey, we've been experiencing oppression for a sustained period of time, but there hasn't been necessarily system-based data to back it up. All of a sudden wipes out the validity that we've been experiencing this oppression. So there's facts on the ground, and there's the data-driven experience, and then there's also the subjective one, and both of those are valid.
And that's why we have Vera doing the qualitative analysis and Wendy to help us with the sort of hard numbers as well, because we recognize that we need to have both if we're gonna have a meaningful solution. So I really appreciate the conversation. I think it's a population that we need to discuss, as we see with this slide right now, but just so that we can continue to digest information about the other populations and the other categories, I want to shift back to just let Wendy walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about one more sort of measure from, again, the sitting population on April 30th, the 976. The average length of stay to date for those people is 95 days. Okay, so for anyone sitting in jail on this day, they have been there an average of 3 months. Okay, the median is 39. So when I talk about the average and the median, so that's the middle point of all the numbers. That means you got a lot of people who are serving over that 95 days. We've sort of broken that down for you. Back to a comment earlier, about 118 or 12% have been there 5 days or less. Okay, so sitting in the jail right now, there's about 12% of them that have been there 5 days or less. Okay, 15% have been there over 6 months. Okay. Through the Safety and Justice Challenge, we look at a lot of these stats in a lot of the jails we work in, and we have seen some jails that these numbers go to over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years. So Spokane doesn't seem to have that issue with large number of people sitting in the jail for over a year, over 2 years. What the largest group here is this 1 to 6 months. Okay, that's the largest portion of the jail. Sitting there right now have been there between 1 and 6 months. Yeah. Yeah.
So whether we're lower than the national,
Yeah.
it's still outrageous that people are sitting there that long. I'm wondering if you have statistics for how many of these people have families that are being destroyed by having to sit there for 6 months. Do you look at people with children in your statistics?
I don't have access to that information coupled with this jail information, but there are national studies that show how destructive even a 48-hour jail stay can be to a job, to a family, to an individual.
What I'm seeing with your statistics then is we're missing one of the destructive consequences, collateral consequences here in your statistics, because we're just assuming all these people are single and they don't have families. When some of them do, and if they're in there 6 months, and if 30% of people of color, and if the majority of them are so poor that they get a public defender or they're eligible, and yet the bail amounts are about 10,000 or higher, I think it would be important to know how it affects the family.
And if I could just add, that is something that we're asking in the focus groups that we're doing tomorrow with incarcerated folks. We ask about the impact of incarceration on things like employment, treatment, family.
Children.
Yep.
So I wonder if you could get some statistics on that.
We're meeting with a smaller sample of the jail, so I don't know that we'll be able to extrapolate, but we will have information from people who are currently incarcerated about those impacts.
I think pretrial services collects that information.
So do
On
they?
the pretrial reports, it says whether they have children or not.
Yep.
And you know, an interesting point was brought up about how this qualitative analysis should really spark the quantitative discussion and should, as you say, sort of look to other sources of data. Working with this data in lots of different jurisdictions, it doesn't talk to each other. It is not usually a one-to-one ratio, so we do the best that we can to sort of profile things, yeah.
Do you know how many individuals that are incarcerated for over 6 months have a mental illness?
That's a tricky number for us. Later on, Vera's going to go over some data that we have looking at folks incarcerated generally who have previously received treatment. But that's something that we can work to see if we can look at by length of stay.
Yeah, and that's what I said, we sort of start with this overall qualitative analysis, and we're working with Vera to sort of fill in the gaps that we can't get from the jail data. So we're working together.
There's also some information about that on the pretrial reports. Just to clarify, this is everybody in the jail, right?
Correct.
It
Yes.
includes sentence and retrial.
And it includes the feds and the holds too, so this is everybody.
Okay, I'm gonna play timekeeper.
Yeah, I know,
Which
I
was
know.
asking you to do. These are such
No.
great questions, but I would.
I got 12 more slides,
But
yeah.
could I just request for later to break it out by pretrial?
Absolutely, we can. Absolutely, we can. As I said, we're trying to give you an overview, we're trying to spark discussion, see where you want to drill down. Yeah.
Super curious about where domestic violence assault or charges land and how this is impacted, just with the overlay of domestic.
We do have the domestic violence flag on all of our charges. It's many. Many of the charges have the domestic violence flag, and that's something we can dig further into as well. Especially when you sort of, again, we're back to our discussion about diversion and alternatives. That's one of the things, you know, are they excluded? Is that gonna limit someone's participation? We would look at that. Okay. So, as I promised, we looked at the sitting jail population. Now we're gonna look at the flow. Okay, so all the bookings, all releases. This is a release snapshot, or not a snapshot. This is the release universe from May 18 to April 19. So it's a year's worth of releases, and it's the most recent we could get when we started this study. Okay, jails change quickly, as everyone in this room knows. So it's important for us to use the most readily available data available. You're going to see all the same pie charts from the sitting jail population, and I'm going to tell you where they're different. 74% of all of the flow or releases, intakes and releases from the jail are male. The sitting population is 87%. That's a factor of the longer length of stay for males and females. Okay? That's standard. That's something we see everywhere. Okay? Makes sense. If we look at age, this actually looks very similar to the sitting jail population. 38%, it's 40%, ages 25 to 34. You've got a 35.5 average length of stay of your flow in and out of the jail system. Sitting jail population is 36. Okay, so very similar profile. Let's talk about race and length of stay. So if we look at the releases percentage, and then this is the length of stay by racial category, okay? Whites have an average length of stay of 15 days. Blacks have an average length of stay of 26.7 days. Okay? Hispanic, 25, Native American, 20. Okay? People of color serve longer in the jail than non-people of color. Yes?
And is this just the flat statistic of actually time? This isn't actually carrying any kind of intersecting data about offenses?
We're going to get to it.
Okay.
We're going to get to this. I just sort of, people of color are serving about 5 to 11 days longer than whites in the jail. Okay?
Is there any data showing why that is?
Not currently. It can be spliced in terms of number of charges. All of the stats that we've already talked about. What their charges are, most serious charge, what their number of charges are, what their bond amount is, and in this snapshot, how they're being released. But we have not gone there.
And does biases play a part in those numbers?
You would have to defend bias for me to answer that. As to what you're looking for when you say bias.
I guess I don't know how to ask, but I'm just
Yeah.
going to say this. We're currently living in a nation in which this is a huge issue. And there's a lot of things that people like myself are concerned about. When you wake up every morning and you hear our representative of America speaking so lowly of people of color. So when I see these numbers, I'm saying that we must all be complacent with the current state of affairs. Just a bombshell, that's all. Just want to bring it up because it's on my mind, just being honest. Hopefully I have permission to speak freely.
I would just say that there's been numerous studies done that show that people of color are sentenced more heavily, they're charged more, with more charges, and that we have to be really cognizant of that when we're looking at these numbers, so that we're not going, well, people of color commit worse crimes.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, they're just charged harsher than white people.
And that's why it's presented generally, so it sparks that conversation. So that you can dig into those numbers and disprove certain things and prove others.
Well, are we all being honest with our feelings though, when this comes out? Because from a national standpoint, I say that we're not.
I mean, all we can do right now is to have the conversation locally. What we can address here is our criminal justice system, and so I appreciate you speaking honestly, and I think all of us hopefully are coming to this conversation with a level of honesty and openness to learn from each other and learn from our experts, so that we can say, how can we do better? How can we address these issues? What do we need to drill down into to understand why they're occurring in the first place? So, continue to bring the level of honesty and engagement, and it will help us really identify what we need to better understand and then ultimately resolve.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So similar to our sitting jail population, we've broken it down by the committing agency and where they came from. This is all very similar with the exception of Spokane County and Spokane Valley. 36% of the sitting population was committed from Spokane Valley, with a smaller percentage of the flow. So
Wait, you said 36% from the valley?
from the sitting or from county, from Spokane County, from the sitting population. So they have a longer length of stay than average. Offenders being committed from Spokane County have a longer length of stay than average. I'm not 100% sure why. It could just be an anomaly, but it's something to note.
We have the district court and superior court, our county, and then our municipal court handles our city misdemeanors, and so our felony cases are being handled.
Got it.
By the county.
And that would explain it. It's just something of note.
But if it's admitting agency, that's a little bit different. Sorry, just to contextualize what I was saying, because our city police can bring felonies in, so this is by admitting agency.
Yeah.
So something different than our building.
Okay, so let's talk about the FTAs, FTCs and new charges. So this is what we were able to do. Again, this is the flow of the population, all the releases from that 1 year time period, whether they have a new charge, an FTA only, FTA and FTC only, and then an FTA. There's lots of categories and we've sort of shrunk them down the best we can. Highlighting out FTA only. So 24% of all the people that flow through the jail are only there for an FTA. Okay, and they're serving 8.3 days, which is under our 17-18 average length of stay. The average length of stay in the jail is 17-18 days. So it's half of the average length of stay, but it's still 24% of your admissions. Yeah.
But that includes the book and release, the people
Correct.
who never see the inside of the jail.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the average length of stay is 8.3 days, so there's a good number of them that are serving longer. Okay? Expected more on this when we're talking about so long. So, and then if we look at number of charges, again, a similar metric to what we looked at. 55% of all the people that flow through the jail only have one charge. And they're serving an average of 7.3 days, okay? So those are your short-termers, those are your 24 hours, those are your cite and release. Those are some of your cash bonds, where it takes, time to cash bond is about 10 days, so that's driving that average up, okay? Comparatively to the sitting jail population, it's only 27%, okay? Makes sense, right? But over half of the people, I won't say people, over half of the events in and out of the jail are for people with only one charge. Yeah.
Did you say it's an average of 10 days for someone to bond out?
Yeah, and we're gonna see that coming up.
I think I heard you say cite and release, but you meant book and release.
Book and release,
Yeah.
sir. Okay. As you see, as the number of charges go up, the length of stay goes up. Okay, so 2 charges, 16.7, 25 for 3, 32, 5 or more, 63. Okay? So a predictor of length of stay, number of charges. Yes?
The number of charges, does that include multiple jurisdictions? So like one with the county, one with the city, and one with the Superior Court? Okay.
All. Okay? Let's talk about bond amount. Very different, almost flipped from what we saw in the sitting jail population. If we look at the $1,000 and under, lower bonds, that's 18% of admitting events in the jail, 35% 5,000 and under. Okay, so 35% of release events go out via bond, or have a bond of $5,000 and under. Let's get to everyone's favorite.
Just to clarify.
Yep.
One more thing about
Yep.
the last one. So 35% of people who are there have a bond amount under $5,000, yet they still stay there over a week on average.
Not there, 35% of events in and out of the jail.
Sorry.
Yes. No, that's, I just.
So they have a bond amount under $5,000.
Correct.
And yet it still takes a week to try to raise that much money.
It takes a week for release, yes. But I can't guarantee all those people will release via bond.
Right, but if they were to. I mean,
Correct.
Either they can't afford it, so they get out of court, or they manage to get it together and get it.
Correct. Okay, on to the charges. So, this actually looks fairly different than what we saw in the sitting jail population. 33% of the total release events are for felony, 39% for gross misdemeanor. Okay? 8% for other misdemeanor. Okay? Gross misdemeanors flowing in and out of the jail, almost 40% of all events stay an average of 3.6 days. Okay? That's that churn that we're talking about. Okay? And that's important when you talk about jail management. Okay? This is a very different profile of people. Anybody sitting in booking knows this population very well. Okay?
Will someone remind me what is typical in gross payments besides domestic violence? DUI, shocker too.
There's some motor vehicle in there as well.
Traffic.
Those court three assaults, you right then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, domestic violence violating no contact order.
Okay. One thing that I do find, and I want to highlight because we had such a robust discussion about it before, is the felony controlled substances. Okay, this is actually very similar in terms of it's 13% of the flow in the population. Okay, it's not. They're serving 26 days. Okay, they don't have a length of stay in the 3 to 5 day range. Okay, if you're coming in on a controlled substance, you're staying about a month. Okay, hang with me for 2 more. The 90-minute is attention span. It's a lot to take in. Okay, so this is one thing that we didn't see in the sitting population because we didn't have it, but how they're released, how they are eventually released from jail. Okay, again, this is the flow of events and how they were released, how those events were released from jail, what the average length of stay was, and what that means in terms of an ADP. Okay, so through a mathematical formula, we can back into this many people flow through, this is how long they serve, this is what it means in that sitting jail population that we talked about, okay? There's your ORs. Released to law enforcement, other agencies, those are mostly state prison, okay? That's just the label that we have. It can be other smaller groups. The vast majority of these are to Washington State Prison. Sentence served, bond surety, court order, charges dropped, bond, cash, and other. If we look at cash and surety bond, there's that 10-day length of stay I mentioned. Okay, it's a 10.5-day length of stay for those people, average for those people making cash bond. Okay, the largest portion of your jail population will eventually, 434, so about half of the sitting population will eventually go to state prison.
And they stay there like a month.
Correct. Okay, so this is the effective case processing, how long it takes for that case to process through the system before they will eventually be transferred. Yeah.
And it's not just a prison, it could be they have an outstanding traffic charge or whatever and they come and get them to take them to another county for that too, right?
Yeah, I believe that's a very small.
But when we did the tour, you said you won't hold people for misdemeanors out of other counties, right?
No, we don't shuttle, we don't put them on the shuttle system. They don't get, they do the same, so.
Another thing I want to point out is this sentence served population, which makes up an estimated about 300 of the sitting jail. While that's also sort of about a little over a month length of stay, most of this time is spent pre-trial. Okay, this is a cumulative length of stay. Okay, so they have not served 36 days sentence. They have, in some cases, spent 35 days pre-trial, been sentenced to time served at court, and go out and sentence served. Yeah.
So just so I make sure, the charges dropped, got filed, is that the prosecutor's not filing charges on them?
Yes, that's my understanding.
16 days, is that what that?
Yes, that's in 16 days. Okay, I mean, I will state ROR in 2 days, that's pretty standard. 48 hours to ROR is what we see in a lot of other jurisdictions. The time to bond or surety is longer than what we see. It's about twice as long to what we normally see. Okay. Last one. Let's talk about the churn. I talked about the total number of jail releases and then the total number of persons released. This also has sort of breakdown, so I'm just going to go through it. Again, there's that 17, our sample has a 17-day length of stay. We've seen 18 for you, so it's in that range. We had 20,600 events, releases, okay? 8,764 are released within 24 hours, okay? So when you talk about jail usage, jail space, about 9,000 people coming, or 9,000 events come and go in 24 hours, okay? So when you talk about use of your jail space, either renovating, building, whatever you're gonna do, you've gotta keep that number in mind in terms of space for book and release, okay? If that's gonna be your continued practice, okay? 4,000 are released between 1 and 3 days, okay? That's the the majority of your ORs too, with that 48-hour length, with a almost 48-hour length stay. 2,900, 3 to 10, 2,300, 10 to 30, and then we've got about 1,000 who are released over 90 days, okay? Again, those are the guys that sit in the jail. Okay? Number of persons released. Out of 20,000 releases, that makes up 12,865 unique individuals. Okay? So when we talk about the recidivism, the coming and returning multiple times in a year, this is where you're going to get that stats. Okay?
And there's no way to know if those returns are because they didn't go to court or if it's a new charge?
I can't say right now without looking at my data.
We're starting to look at that, so it's something we'll keep you posted on. Okay. Of those people, about 8,800 are people who just come and go once in a year. 2,186 people have at least 2 release events in this 1-year period. Okay? Again, this is just a 1-year period. If we were to expand this to 2 years, it's going to double for the most part. Okay? 463 individuals have been released 5 or more times from your jail. Okay? 4 or more, 5 or more, this is high for what we see. So there's a high utilizer issue here. Yeah. What'd you have a question?
Oh, no, I was
Oh,
searching
sorry.
my eye.
Okay.
No, really respect it, but I do have a question. And thank you for that. It's a great presentation. I just want to really lift that up. When we go back to my question back on the slide or on the graph for the Spokane County jail releases with the average length of stay in days of May broken down by race.
It can be.
Yeah, well, it is.
Oh, the pie.
Yeah, the pie, right, that pie chart, thank you. The race one. My question back to that was the comparison to charges, right? So, and it's okay that you don't have it, I just kind of want to articulate that I didn't see that
No.
here. Okay.
No, but
my
it could be.
request is that would be one request
Okay,
that I have to
so
pick that up.
you're looking for length of stay by both charge and race.
By number of charges and race?
Right, so in other words, so they're sentenced, right? So we have equal sentencing, right? So similar charges, right, versus similar charges, right? So when we're looking at the length of stay broken down by race and measuring up that against similar charges and what do we actually get as far as length of stay in that comparison? Does that make sense?
And then just on this last one, the kind of what it means for the releases within 24 hours is 42%
Yes.
of
All
events-
releases, all release events in the year were out in 24 hours.
So if, in the context of building a new jail or renovating an old one, that kind of indicates that there needs to be a larger booking area, not more cells. Right? I mean, kind of would make.
I'm not gonna make that judgment.
Okay.
It needs to accommodate
Right.
8,800 24-hour release events.
Yeah. It's not more beds that we need if they're leaving within 24 hours.
I have another data question that's beyond the scope. One of the things about lately is if we have the data on how many people at any one time are classified with a need for maximum supervision.
Yeah.
So that informs what kind of facilities you might.
I completely agree, and I sort of touched on it when we were talking about peaking factor, a classification factor. If a decision is made to go down either renovation or expanded group, that would be something I would highly recommend doing, is a space utilization study, looking at the classification levels and how to accommodate those. And that's where the sort of mental health needs also comes in. Your special populations would need to be planned and housed appropriately.
Okay, we're gonna take a 15-minute break.
If
That
I-
was a
if
lot
I
of
may,
data.
you guys were great.
Yeah.
You're so engaged, so respectful. I want to thank everyone. I think this is gonna. You're so interested. I'm really jacked about your data-driven research. I think you guys are gonna do a good job.
So we will
Good
come
job.
back in 15 minutes, take time to digest all of that information, go to the bathroom, check your email. But Wendy is here if you have questions for her.
And just as we're transitioning to that too, coming into, community studies, one of the things that some of the community brought with us is we have this nice little graphic on what some of the things that you've already touched on and what some of the philosophies of reform are. We also have the Smart Justice Spokane, the community letter that we sent. We brought copies of that as well. And we also brought a summary of what those recommendations are. And again, some of those you've already touched on. Curtis Hampton has copies of that for anybody that would like them, and we brought plenty.
I'll be glad to walk around and hand these out or just pass them around, whatever's most efficient for you guys.
I think if folks are interested, go see Curtis. We're going to break, and just a reminder that this process is about developing recommendations as a group with a variety of experts in the room, so I think that's an important information point, but certainly just a piece of the conversation. So 15 minutes, and we'll meet you back here. All right, in order to let you guys out on time, we're going to ask that you come back to the table so we don't go over. Just like our last meeting, we're reserving the last 30 minutes for public comment, so we would just ask our task force members to remain to hear back any other additional comments or questions. In that vein, I'm going to pass out some note cards to folks who aren't task force members, so if you have questions that you don't want to forget or comments that you might want us to consider but don't want to share vocally today, you can just jot them down here and we'll take them back either way. So with that, we'll hand it back over to Vera.
Great. Okay, thank you all. I'm really excited that we are right on time and sticking to the schedule. But I'm also really glad that you asked a lot of questions. It shows just how thoughtful you all are being about this process. A lot of great questions. We've written them all down, and I can't guarantee that we will be able to answer all of your questions, and there, as was said earlier, will need to be some prioritizing of questions and additional data analysis, but we're really grateful for that discussion. So, in talking with Maggie and after our last meeting, we were thinking about how to keep the momentum going with this group. It's a large group, and so it would be hard to ask you all as a large group to meet every week, but what we are going to do is break into subcommittees. So what we were thinking is that there would be 3 groups in the task force of about 10 to 15 members each. We would ask that you meet weekly. We know that's a big ask. We know you're busy, but this is really important work, and that would be starting the week of August 12th. And so what we would ask you to do in your subcommittee groups is to conduct research on key questions. So we're turning it over to you all to do the research. And we ask that you be creative. This could be looking at national best practices. It could be doing assessments of what's available here locally. It could be talking to people who've gone through the criminal justice system and have the expertise of experience. It could be, as Caitlin mentioned earlier, speaking to those who are victims and survivors of crime to get their perspective. So the sky is the limit. It's really up to you as subcommittees to do this research. We also ask that you work together. I'm going to show you the subcommittee topics in just a minute. You'll see that there's a lot of overlap. So there may be times when you decide that it makes sense for 2 subcommittees to meet or for there to be some questions back and forth. You can all rely on each other. There's so much experience and expertise around this table. And so what we would ask is that you will provide your findings around your questions and your recommendations to the larger task force, and we'll come to consensus around those recommendations at a final meeting. And you will have help We're not just throwing this out to you to do completely on your own. We at Vera are available. Wendy, I'm sure, is available. I'm volunteering her. I know she's excited about the data, so she will also be available to answer questions. We can tap into our network of national experts on questions that you have, and you will also have some intern help as well. Who doesn't love interns? They are great. So they will help you as well to staff each of your subcommittees.
We're in the process of finalizing offers for interns to staff all of the committees. We're hoping there will be 2 interns per committee to really help take notes, set the agenda, and then do research that Vera or JFA might not be well positioned to take on, and support the work of every committee in that way.
Okay. So, this is what we're thinking in terms of subcommittees. The first one is rethinking incarceration. And that can have many different meanings. But the questions that we would pose to this group, based on the qualitative and quantitative data that you've seen so far and will continue to see, what system changes need to be made? Last time I asked the group who thinks the system is working perfectly, and there wasn't one hand. So I think we all agree that changes can be made. So this subcommittee will be thinking about what those changes are. They'll also be looking to what other jurisdictions are doing. And we are very aware that this subcommittee has happened several different times over the past 10 or so years, and that these questions have been asked. So we're going to help you think about, in some future slides, how to focus it and narrow it down a bit based on what we're seeing so far in the data. And Alex is going to take you through some of those slides in just a minute. The second subcommittee is increasing community collaboration and coordination. So remembering back to the slides that Caitlin presented about community resources, there were different feelings about what's available in the community. Some said there are so many resources, people just don't know about them. Some said there are resources, but they're not so great, all of them. Others said there aren't resources. So this is really assessing what's available and how different agencies are collaborating and coordinating. And so some questions might be, what resources currently exist? Are they used to the fullest extent possible? We see this in a lot of communities where we work, where there actually are resources available, just nobody knows about them, or they haven't thought about reaching that particular type of organization. For example, if there's an organization that serves LGBTQ folks, and it hasn't been tapped when it comes to those who are justice involved. So thinking about those types of collaborations. And what are the gaps? So what just doesn't exist, and how can we think about building that out? What are other communities doing? The third subcommittee will focus on costs. So this is our finance folks. Thinking about the average daily costs and staffing at the jail, so what's the current situation, thinking about investments that could be made. So that includes thinking about if you were to make repairs to the jail, if you were to build a new jail, if you don't build a new jail, what resources could you build out in the community? So this is thinking about costs for those different options. And so you really see there is overlap between these different groups, and it's going to take a lot of coordination. So one thing that we recommend, do you all remember the challenge statements that we started working on last time? Remember these? Well, if not, we recommend that this could be one way that your subcommittee could get started. So writing a challenge statement is about defining a specific problem. You're not presuming the solutions yet. We will get to solutions. We are going to get there as subcommittees, but starting to really think about what are the problems within your specific subcommittee area. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex to share some key takeaways from what you heard today. Now, some of this is going to be repetitive, but as someone who only pretends to be a data geek, I find that hearing things repeated can be really helpful, and seeing it presented in different ways can help with different learning styles. So she's going to draw out some key takeaways from the data to help you think about what you could focus on in your subcommittees. before we jump to Alex, any questions? No, not yet, okay. And after Alex's presentation, Maggie's gonna share some subcommittee assignment ideas and we'll get feedback from all of you. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm a quantitative researcher from Vera, and so as Liz mentioned, my aim with these next few slides I'm presenting is to highlight some key points from Wendy's data presentation and kind of open up this discussion of how these may relate directly to the discussions you're going to be having in your subcommittee groups and how they can be practically applied here in Spokane. And so for the most part, all these numbers are coming directly from the presentation you just saw. So again, it'll be repetitive, but a bit of a different style of presenting. There will be a couple new numbers, so I'll flag those for you when they come up. And I'm also going to try and tie these back to some of the themes we've heard both from our meetings here as a task force and themes that we've heard from our discussions in the community. So just to start off, pretrial incarceration has come up a lot in this room and also in our discussions in the community. A key theme from our community town halls is the vision of a criminal justice system that doesn't rely heavily on pretrial incarceration, yet we see that over 70% of the jail population on a given day is held pretrial. So I think we can take this as an opportunity for re-envisioning how we serve people who are awaiting trial, seeing that this is a huge population of people in the jail. And as we've highlighted a couple times today and in the past, a key solution that was raised in our last meeting here as a task force was to decrease federal holds as a possibility for reducing the jail population. And again, we see that 10% of the jail population is folks on federal holds, and they're staying for over 2 months on average in the jail. And put another way, in a 1-year period, over 700 people on federal holds left the jail. And with this 68-day average length of stay, that's a total of over 50,000 yearly bed days for these people.
I'm sorry, I missed the first meeting, so what's the issue with the federal holds? Because from my perspective, their lawyers are here, their court date is here, they need to be here in Spokane. So are we trying to eliminate them from our jail population?
Just a conversation in sort of the visioning and the challenge statements and sort of brainstorming as a group. It was one area that was identified as up for discussion. And there are a variety of reasons why folks think they need to stay here, and then there's also challenges that it presents for our jail management as well. So something to address.
Yeah, the other thing is that, you know, the folks that are here for the federal program, if they aren't in our jail, where are they? And they might be in our community and stuff. So, you know, where else is there? Where else are they going to be located at, if not in the jail? And stuff. So, you know, keep in mind that these are people that are, you know, potentially doing real harm to individuals in the community. So, so if you're not going to put them in our jail, where are you going to put them?
Are they the drug addicts?
Oh no, no, these are.
That's the other
Yeah.
jail with commercial subcontract with, and we have ours, right?
So we've also had a discussion about folks who are held in jail on lower level charges. And again, this isn't broken down into violent and nonviolent specifically, so that's an important part of this to note, as we noted earlier. But
Right, so that, I guess what I'm not clear on is it says 62% of people who left the jail were admitted on misdemeanor charges or holds, is that correct?
yes.
But that's different than the statistics we got in this right here, so how is?
So these are the numbers from those releases, so the second set of charts and graphs. So this is a 1 year period, everyone who was released from jail in that 1 year period, 62% of those people, their top charge was a misdemeanor charge or a hold.
62% of people or 62% of releases?
62% of releases, sorry, yes, that's an important distinction. Yeah, so 62% of jail releases were for bookings with a top charge of a misdemeanor or a hold.
Okay, but at the average daily population, only 16% of the people in the jail are there on misdemeanor charges, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is capturing that flow, as Wendy kind of detailed, the difference between an average population and the flow in and out of the jail. So
Okay.
there are a lot of people in a 1 year period coming in and out of the jail with low level charges.
So that 62% includes book and release, right?
Yes. And then that number goes up to almost 90% if we include nonviolent felonies as well.
Right, but that includes assault, domestic violence, violating no contact orders, harassment, all of those. that are
Yes,
not considered
exactly, that are
nonviolent, right?
like gross misdemeanors, yeah, so,
All
there are.
misdemeanors and non-violent felonies. All misdemeanors and non-violent
Right.
felonies.
Right, and that's a breakdown we can make in the future, it's violent and nonviolent, overall.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so when we talk about breakdowns, so this is my flat out request on all of this information, on everything that we've got on every slide, on every graph, on every chart, is that it is disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So that is across the board on all the information on this, on these percentages, on the charts, on everything, that there is a huge need, especially after what has been quantified here today, that this is broken down by those categories on everything, please.
Definitely. Okay. And then, bail reform has been a really common theme, especially in our discussions with community, the need for a different approach to bail. And again, in the data, we're seeing that even the lowest bail amounts are keeping people in jail. 18% of the releases in this 1 year period were for bookings that had a bond assessed under $1,000, and the average length of stay was nearly a week for these people.
Is this just people who paid that $1,000, or does that include if they went back to court and had their bond?
This is everyone who was assessed a bond of $1,000 or less. And we do see that of this group, 50% were released after paying bond, or sorry, not 50, 15% were released after paying bond.
Do you see how many of them pled guilty to get out?
Wendy, do you know? I don't think we can see plea information in this data.
Unless they were then sentenced.
Yeah,
We don't have that information right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me correct, we have to just plea.
Right.
And then we get out.
Yeah, we don't have that in this data set. Other questions here? And again, toward the end of Wendy's presentation, we had our discussion of people who come through the jail many times in a single year. And from that data, we see that 15% of people who left the jail were released 3 or more times in a single year. When we take a look at what charges are typically associated with these bookings, we see charges associated with poverty and substance use for people cycling through the jail, such as possession, theft, and trespassing are among their most common charges. So this brings up the potential question of community resources that could be directed to these folks, whether jail incarceration is the correct response to these types of repeated charges.
So you may know, my thrust would be about substance use disorder, and this is the first time you've actually talked about it. Yet none of the statistics you Curtis was talking about quantifiable, nothing that we've seen so far has some way tried to quantify substance use disorder within the people that are incarcerated. And I would think it's higher than that. There's no doubt in my mind that it is higher than that, because we don't have anything that says that, that they're there, and one of the issues, at least one of the issues, is substance use. I do know that when we see people that come out, they get out, the court has asked them to, or they've tried to get an assessment so they can get into treatment. It's almost impossible right now to get an assessment so you can get to treatment. And if you do get the assessment so you can get to treatment, there's no beds. So, there's a huge issue that is there that we're really passing over, and I really believe that those numbers are higher than this especially.
Yeah. I would just add, my partner and I were outside talking during the break, and people who are in, based on the JFA data for possession charges, are staying an average length of stay of almost 30 days, which is the same length of stay as a treatment center would have, and yet we still see them getting out and coming back. And so that money we spend to keep somebody there for 30 days might be better spent in building another treatment center or several, and putting them there.
Exactly. Right, and just to kind of keep dovetailing off that, so the thing is that those were people that were sentenced to do that. That does not speak to what is being talked about here now, is the underlying cause behind the justice of all behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, we see possession of controlled substance as one of the most common charges for people who are cycling through the jail multiple times.
I would also suggest, in combination with looking at the behavioral health data behind these types of bookings, is also if you have the information on whether they're Medicaid or non-Medicaid. Because again, if they're non-Medicaid, there's so much less resources available to them. And that's good information for legislators and the state to know about.
It also speaks to the poverty in Spokane, where 90% Medicaid and all that stuff.
I think it'd be really interesting to understand the behavioral health costs that are incurred while incarcerated, so we could compare that to the services that are available. And certainly, the assumption would be that a large percentage of these folks would be Medicaid eligible, and having the feds and the state pay for the Medicaid dollars versus our county our county taxes doing that would be, we talk a lot about in healthcare is sort of the best place and most economical place to receive care. And so I think having that as a comparison point would be really helpful on some of the policy advocacy that should be done in terms of state responsibility.
That's a really great point for the costs activity.
And I would also say that, not only money, financially economical, but I think it's been shown enough that incarceration is not therapeutic. So no matter how many programs we put inside of a jail, it's not going to help as much as if we can offer those outside.
But the provider, right, I think in the pretrial status, they can help do those things. It would have to be voluntary. So it's not attached to a sentence.
Well, if we can compel people by incarcerating them to take plea deals, I think we can compel them to well-being.
The Ninth Circuit won't allow us to.
Yeah.
So the next slide actually also addresses some of the same issues that are being raised around the table. So
Yeah, and this is a new data point, so there's my flag for a number you haven't seen yet. And this is data from 2018, just highlighting that behavioral health concerns do affect over half of the people who are admitted to jail in 2018. So almost 60% of the people admitted to jail in 2018 had received mental or behavioral health treatment at any time in the past, and over a third had received treatment just in the last year.
Felonies and misdemeanors, total population.
Everyone.
Can you clarify mental or behavioral health treatment? Does that include if they just went to their primary care provider and got a pill for depression, or does that include like hospitalization hospitalization, long-term counseling, what's included?
So this data was actually compiled for us by Kathleen Torrella's organization at Community Services. They looked at all jail bookings and cross-referenced that number with folks who had access treatment through Raintree, which is the database that they use there, and then were able to give us these numbers.
Unfortunately, that organization no longer exists after January 1. And so it's now dispersed across multiple NCOs and that sort of thing. So we can always use that as baseline, that type of data, as we have an incident there, just keep in mind that it doesn't go on and on.
Yeah. Which is why it's 2018 data.
And it should be something we should be holding our managed care organizations accountable to make sure that data is available.
What was the question?
Does the 59% include substance use disorders treatment?
I believe so. Kathleen, can you speak a little bit to what Raintree would capture in terms of treatment?
Well, Raintree was able to essentially its purpose was data collection across a 6-county region. It included all the services and encounters and all the client demographics of all individuals served by Medicaid, as well as those who were non-Medicaid but are at or below the 120% for their poverty level. So it was obviously the poor, whether they were on Medicaid or not. They were receiving services from contracted providers through the Medicaid program, and then they're funding for the non-Medicaid eligible individuals. We collected that data and reported it to the healthcare authority who funded the contracts for those services.
And it included substance abuse.
It did, and we knew it by the type of agency, and we also knew whether it was residential treatment or outpatient treatment or sobering, all of those types of things. And so we have the services on service codes at that level, so we know we can drill down into exactly what type of services.
And the reason it includes substance use disorders because it is in the DSM, so it's mental health, right? I mean,
It's behavioral health.
Behavioral.
It's not mental health.
Okay.
Mental health has its own set.
So in that data would not be if you had received a prescription through your primary care, because that would be separated. So it's really, I think, important to probably note, this is, you're receiving services from a behavioral health entity, not primary care, where increasingly folks go first for that type of treatment.
Yes, when we first saw this, we noted that the numbers are pretty astounding, and it's still a conservative estimate because we don't have the full universe of data at our disposal. So thank you for noting that.
And I think that Allison's point, and I might have missed your comment earlier, but potentially in the future, through the NCOs and potentially through Better Health Together, maybe working with the NCOs, we may be able to get the identified data that we could utilize for this. But we know that the NCOs, as well as the ASO, we're still working on trying to get full and complete data because of the integrated managed care system changeover.
Did that data include crisis services or MCAT, or was it just for your outpatient providers?
It was also.
It was.
So it would have been included in MCAT, so all services.
Oh, okay.
And then I also want to highlight, as we've seen the stark racial disparities in the use of jail incarceration here. So as Wendy noted, people of color are incarcerated in jail at a much higher rate than white people. And the goal of a justice system and community that promotes racial equity is a theme that has come up in this room and has been a huge part of our discussions in the community. So we have to think seriously about these disparities and solutions that target and highlight the racial disparities that we're seeing in the use of jail incarceration.
And these numbers are specific to Spokane.
These are, yes.
Can I ask a question on that? The data showed that there's been a 5% increase in, that the jail population has been maintained basically stable, but that there's been a 5% increase in the percentage of people of color who are now in the jail from 2016. It would be really helpful to get some data about why that is. What are the factors that have led to that significant increase, and why are things going in the wrong direction with that particular question? So I think that would be something that's really helpful to know.
And is that comparative to the increase in population overall in our county? And have we had an increase in people of color
here are relative to the population of each group, and we can look at this change over time as well.
And so in that, but dovetailing again, you know, that encapsulates my request that all of this carry those, including these new requests coming up, automatic, because what has a tendency to happen, and I noticed that even in the handout that we have, right, that we brought with us, is that race is kind of down over here in the corner, you know. It needs to be at the top of all this, it needs to be at that forefront, and then there's a lens that we view everything through, as well as all of the other information without it, but we have those two things, we have those spaces to do that duality to kind of compare it to, right? So that, I just wanted to use that to quantify my request, is so that also these questions that are coming up and these new requests, that this is just automatically inputted.
So, do we have data available to us on what the nature of the offense is, and the charge is, that ultimately gets part of our catch and release program? Because, you know, the number, getting back to the gentleman's question back here, I mean, we've capped out at a number, but it's because of capacity. And so we do get into a situation to where when we've reached that capacity point, we then get into a catch and release. And so some folks are released back in the community so we can free up a jail for somebody with a greater charge. Are we, do we have a way to capture that number?
Yes, I'm looking to Diane because she's been diving into that data. I believe so. And those book and releases are determined and authorized by court orders from municipal court and district court that outline which charges we can do that with. And so those should be captured in the release information of individuals who are booked and released. And Diane is nodding, so that is correct.
Okay, good.
That includes warrants, Jim.
And I just,
I didn't hear, I'm sorry to interrupt, I didn't hear the last thing about warrants.
Including warrants.
It includes warrants as well.
Okay, got it.
just to respond to the next question about what's changed, I'm just throwing this out there, I don't know, but not too many years ago, when we were looking for data, we did not have very good identification for Hispanic people in the jail. And I noticed that the numbers of Hispanic particularly went up. So I'm just hoping that we can look and see, did we make a change in how we were identifying people around that time, if that was a factor. So it may be a identification.
And it's possible because Hispanic is an ethnicity that gets overlaid, and it may have been missed in the past.
Previously, it was problematic. I don't know how good it is, or when that change was made.
It was a methodology how they were asking the questions in booking, and I sat down with Maggie and also with Burns. I think we've got that corrected pretty well. So.
But in terms of matching that when that changed, that might.
The system also changed, that was the jail management system changed in 2014, so how that information was captured in 2014 is different than how it is now, which also might contribute to some of the changes.
And that possibly might also connect again with healthcare authority and behavioral health and recovery services, because they separated Hispanic out as an ethnicity versus a race. And so it's looking at other things, and maybe we had changed that recently, in the last few years to correct this.
It was under the old jail management system, was the way it was tried. But with the new management system and working with Burns and some of the other databases, we got to get that solved.
And I know you want to move on, but I'm just going to throw a plug in here. I really appreciate what I just heard, what I just captured out of that, is that our data system, our ability to kind of get in there and data has gotten much better since the time that I started getting active here. And I really, really appreciate that drive to do that and then able to actually see some of the accomplishment of that here in this space and hear that from different people. So I just wanted to really kind of lift that up.
We're gonna hold off the rest of the questions and comments from the public just until we have the public comment in a short 15-10 minutes. But we just want to wrap up the slideshow before we get there.
And I just have one more slide highlighting, again, disparities in length of stay on average for people of color versus white people. People of color are staying for much longer in jail on average. And as Wendy noted in her presentation, there are similar to fewer number of charges associated with an individual booking for people of color compared to white people. Looking at the most common charges by race shows similar charge types across races. So these are important considerations, and also highlighting that it's important to think more broadly about what could be contributing to these disparities in terms of length of stay and use of incarceration.
Great. Thank you. That's all for me. All right, so let me go back.
These slides. So we only have a few minutes, but I'm curious to hear from all of you about whether there are other questions that these 3 subcommittees should be asking based on what you've heard today.
One piece that we didn't, that's not explicit in the slides that I think we should consider is not only in terms of the second committee, increasing community collaboration, looking at how we can have community resources also pair with whatever we're doing at the, with the city or the county to make sure we're collaborating well as people transition out or coming in or whatever that looks like.
Because there's been so much talk about race, what category would that, what subcommittee would that fit under? Would it be the first one when you're talking about system changes?
What do you all think?
I think 1 and 2.
1 and 2?
I think all of them.
All of them?
If we're taking an equity lens, it should be applied to all 3.
Great question. Thank you. Other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, sorry, I'm taking up a lot of
That's
space.
okay.
So, that, as one of the realities too, is when we're dealing with impacted populations and there's this expectation and this need to have community at the table, one of the consistent dynamics that comes back over and over and over again, and this is my question, how many people in this room, how many people at this table are here on the clock? Okay. All right? So, how many community members on these committees or are here are not on the clock? Okay, so that's an issue. And when we start diving into the deeper stuff about how we got here and what's really some of the other layers of what's going on, that's part of it. Okay, so my statement is, and it's a question, it's a statement, my statement is, you want community to come to the table, you want a meaningful community voice at the table, community also needs to be compensated to be at the table. Okay, because we're the ones that are impacted, yet we're the ones sacrificing to be here.
Yep, and we know that that is something that is being thought about and discussed. We had a conversation about that actually yesterday, so I appreciate you bringing that into the room. Other thoughts for the subcommittees? Yep, Curtis?
This isn't necessarily for the subcommittee, but are there any Superior Court representation here today?
Not
Superior Court didn't make it today, but they were here at the first meeting and they're a member of the task force.
How about the prosecutor's office?
We have city prosecutor here.
Just checking, because in order for this thing to work, everybody have to have buy-in, and so I just want to make sure that the citizens people are also dedicated to this change.
We are recording, right? So hopefully they can watch the enthralling video.
We, all of us are incredibly busy, and I'm looking at faces across the table who come to many meetings that I set, and so sometimes there's a juggle, but and people can't stay for the whole thing, or they can't make a certain meeting. We do our best to set this within the advance notice to at least get a critical mass, but we do make all of the materials available online, and I send them out to the task force members as well, so that you can review them if there's a gap. But agreed, we all need to be sort of on the same page working together if we're gonna meaningfully address things.
So in the interest of time, in conversation with Maggie, we have pre-assigned each of you on the task force to a subcommittee. Maggie is going to, I know, aren't you excited? Isn't everyone so excited to know what subcommittee you're on? So Maggie is going to read out that list for us. If you have a strong objection to your assignment, let us know. And then we're almost done, guys. Promise. And then we're going to go into community feedback.
I'm actually, just for the sake of time, I'll email out the proposed assignments. I'll underscore they're proposed. So if you feel like you are have much more expertise in one area than another, feel free to let me know and we can try and juggle things around. But I was trying to match sort of skill sets, to the subcommittee areas, and then also balancing out the numbers and sort of the experience where necessary. So I'll send those out. Feel free to respond back if you have any concerns about the tentative placement.
Okay, and then just reminders about some of the next steps in this process. There's a community town hall tonight. There's a community town hall tomorrow night. We encourage you all to come. We will be, as I said earlier, doing focus groups / town halls in the jail. So those folks can participate tomorrow, both downtown and at Geiger. Wendy's working away on her forecasting process. And subcommittee meetings. You all will be meeting hopefully weekly in your subcommittees. Any questions before we turn it over to community?
Will there be a circle back around to this particular as well after the?
Yep, we will have future meetings of this body, and our hope is that, well, our expectation, I'll say, is that the subcommittees will report back to this larger group. And we will come to consensus around some recommendations to go to the Board of County Commissioners. All right, I want to thank you all so much for being here. I can't believe how quickly that time went. It seemed like it was so long when you look at the agenda, but your participation was really fantastic, and we really appreciate your dedication and your thoughtfulness and your respectfulness and the hard questions that you're asking. So thank you. So we'll now open it up for community comment. Maggie, I'll let you take the reins.
All right, so again, if task force members can stay if you are able to, and just let folks provide any additional questions or feedback who are at the table. Sure. Commissioner French.
Well, not knowing which committee I'm going to end up on, I hope Maggie got it right. My ask for all of you is, as you're looking at the different opportunities for programs and changes to the system and things like that, also consider how do we pay for it? Because ultimately, that's where the Board of County Commissioners fits in. Is our role in the system is we got to pay the bills and stuff. So any insights you might have in that area would be really appreciated for us in terms of trying to make sure that as we reshape the system, we've got the resources necessary to be able to do that. So not everything is free, and so and we are. I can share with as a board. We are prepared to look at doing shifting from one pot to another and things like that, where we can see that we can benefit or improve the system and stuff. So that's also an opportunity for us and stuff. Quite frankly, the conversation about the mental health crisis stabilization, that's an expense shift from the jail to a mental health facility, one way or the other. And Brianna and I were just talking about this earlier. One way or the other, and I pay for that individual, whether they're in treatment or they're in my jail, and I'd rather have them in treatment and stuff. And so, anyway, I just encourage you to give some thought to that too, so that will help us come to a solution.
Do we have any data on cost per person per day in the jail?
It's pretty rough at this point, but we've actually been working with our budget officer to do a much more detailed cost analysis. I don't know, Tanya, if you want to sort of update on that.
I can provide the group an update, yes. The county's financial platform is very cumbersome and very difficult to get into the details. So we've done a couple things. First of all, Ozzie Rippentrog is here. We've hired him. He is a consultant from Galena Consulting that has helped build a tool for us. In fact, we haven't seen it yet. That's why he's here today and tomorrow. That is going to better enable the county to drill into the cost details of the jail. So it'll be very much like what Wendy presented. It's just data. This is what the cost is, so that we can start asking really good questions of how we can reinvest and move those dollars into different high impact programs and alternatives. The other thing that we've done just countywide is we are resetting our financial foundation. We're implementing a new software system for budgeting and forecasting that will also just better equip the county and give us the tools so that we can continuously have this insight into how our programs are operating from a financial perspective. The beauty of this system that we're implementing is that it can pair statistics with the financial data. So I think that now, we're still quite a ways, so just to manage expectations of what that will look like, that is still roughly, to make it really good, is still like 3 years out. But we've started down that path. We've made some really good decisions, and we've got good resources, and we're moving in that direction.
So just a rough number real quick, is it still about roughly 130 a day?
That's just on ADP. Now, when you break it down like what Wendy did based on statistics, and you want to get into what is it costing for that person that's just being booked and released, that's the kind of data that we're going to be able to start to share with you. Somebody with a mental health issue or a medical issue coming into the jail has a very different cost figure than that average. So we're going to now be able to start looking at that and providing that information.
I was just gonna touch on that, because you spoke a little bit about that number when we went on the tour. And it seems that $130 per person per day number is a little disingenuous, because some people might cost $500 a day. Some people, if they're just getting booked and released, it just costs the wages of the officer who is, booking and releasing, and the, electricity for an hour. So it definitely, that would be great information to have.
Yes, just very similar to what Commissioner French said. He hit it right there of, if we're putting somebody in jail that has a mental health issue, and we're treating them in the jail on a mental health issue, versus if they went to another facility and we treated them there, we're now going to be able to have that kind of information to just better facilitate these kinds of discussions.
Was I supposed to put you two on the cost committee?
I sure hope so.
Before we take any other questions around the table, is there anyone who joined us who's not members who want to make a comment or question? Yes.
I would like to.
Can you also just introduce yourself?
Sure.
Before?
My name's Liz Moore. I'm the Director of the Peace and Justice Action League, and I'm the co-chair with Curtis of the Smart Justice Spokane Executive Committee. And Smart Justice Spokane is a coalition of about 30 organizations that has been working for at least 6 years to end mass incarceration and systemic racism in our county criminal justice system. And so I just want to highlight that we spent a lot of time as a team looking at and writing this letter to you all, to the county commissioners in particular, to lift up the factors that we think are imperative to be included in this thinking process that you all are engaged in. So it's 6 pages, and that's a lot, but it's a lot less than the number of slides you've seen already today. So I just would ask that folks take time to read this. We did this with the intention of laying out, given the very complex projections that are being considered and calculations that are being made, what are all the things that, from our perspective, need to be, or at least the minimum things, I wouldn't say all the things, but the minimum things that need to be put into that set of formulas and calculations and so forth. One of those is that the state legislature just recently passed a set of bills that increases investments in mental health resources, and so that's obviously important for us to consider going forward. It's not part of our current snapshot, it's not part of our current set of daily operating assumptions. And then we also have a 2-page summary of the 6-page letter. So this is intended to make this really digestible in this highly complex operation that you all are doing. So that's one question I have, I guess, about the what are they called, subcommittees, is how those subcommittees can take a comprehensive look at not only, I appreciate the question of what's happening in other jurisdictions, but what are the changes that are coming because of the implementation of I-940, the changes that are coming because of the increased funding around mental health, other factors that are coming down the pike category that may not be what's happening in other jurisdictions because those aren't coming down the pike in those jurisdictions.
Great, thank you. And I think just to clarify, sort of looking at other jurisdictions or looking at if we have resources, what else could we be doing that other jurisdictions are doing? But thanks for flagging the fact that there are additional resources that are either already at play here or to be soon at play. So thank you. Yes?
Can I just make a comment to that? I think one of the things that the Accountable Community of Health is really charged with is looking
as broadly as we can about the needs around how we integrate the healthcare system with everything else that keeps you healthy. And one of the things we've been exploring is how you create more of a strategic plan for behavioral health needs, and that, yes, the legislature made some investment. It is not in a particularly organized manner that I think you will feel like, wow, they really did their job in that way. And so at this point, we're not really solving for what we should. We're sort of being grateful we're at least talking about it and starting that investment process. But I think if we were to embark as an accountable community of health on where should we be moving towards, and then you start solving backwards for workforce issues, reimbursement rate issues, and so forth. Right now, it just feels like keep doing more because the crisis is so high. So I would just open in some of these planning conversations that there may be a role for the ACH to be helping to facilitate that.
Great, thank you. I think Rick first and then Nick. If you can introduce yourself.
My name is Rick Matters. I'm an Episcopal priest, and as a pastor of the gospel, I just want to hold up the human dignity of all the people that we're talking about here. There's a Harvard law professor who looked at suffering, and he divided into necessary suffering. You know, if I drop a rock on my foot, I'm necessarily going to feel some pain and suffering. But there's a lot of what he calls discretionary suffering that we impose by decisions we make as a community and as a criminal justice system. And it reminds me of when I taught preschool and kindergarten. One of the fun things was, you know, here's a pitcher of water, it's bigger than the glass, but you want to empty the pitcher, and some of the kids would just keep pouring the waters, you know, and it's just more and more suffering, in other words. So the highlight I want to, the area I want to highlight is especially the county prosecutor's office and how many charges, because at least according to the spokesman review, they're pouring more water into the system and creating more challenge for all of you, for all of us, especially people working in the system. And they have discretion on how many people they charge. And ours is way out of proportion. In fact, the newspaper said not even close compared to counties of similar size in the state of Washington. So, you know, I think that's something to deal with or to think about.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nick Sterling with Columbia Legal Services. Thank you all very much for your time and effort in this incredibly important issue. One thing that struck me was that there really is a consensus about what should be going on here, and that's focusing on de-incarceration and services and community-based support. And I think that's really exciting and great. And the thing that you guys are doing now is you are beginning to do those things in a lot of different ways. So there's the bail project. There are MAT services now being provided in jail. The mental health crisis facility is going to be coming online. You've got new teams out there doing services to divert. But there are other things that could be done, and that really should be the focus of what we're talking about going forward. It's impossible to know how many people you need in your jail without figuring out how all of those reforms are actually going to work over the long term. And so from our perspective, it's crucial that that be the focus to determine what are the reforms that are working and what are the reforms that can be brought to bear that aren't being tried now, and how can things be changed. Because the jail is the one place they have no ability to say no. They've got no discretion. They have to take every person that every other decision maker decides should end up there. And it's incumbent on all of the decision makers, on all the policy makers, to think about their particular role in that reality. Because we could reduce the jail population today if there were policy decisions that were made that are different. And so I would just promote that idea that we need to be all working on in the same direction, and it feels like there's a lot of consensus about what that direction is. And I really commend all of you for organizing this and moving forward in that way.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from community members who joined us? Well, thank you all for making time to be here with us. Jan, I know you had your hand raised. Do you want to go back to your comment or question?
I was just wondering, will these subcommittees have a list of current resources within our community so that we can look at the expansion of current resources versus trying to create something that may already exist, or looking at current resources and asking the question, how can we do it differently to meet this need?
I don't know of one single comprehensive list of resources that might be relevant. Maybe Sabrina has one that she can
The
share.
Fig Tree is usually a pretty good place to look.
Probably the
It's
most comprehensive.
real thick, there's tons of resources in there. Hopefully there'll be some folks on each committee who can actually look through the book and with the group and say, actually, this one sucks, this one, you know, is inaccessible, this one doesn't serve people, whatever, but I think the Fig Tree is probably the most comprehensive list there is.
So a starting point. And we'll make sure that we have interns collect whatever lists exist and distribute them to the committees. Is that-
Maggie, I would also offer that BHT is convening a community information exchange group who's really inventorying. And while Fig Tree is definitely 211, and we've identified 10 different resource lists, which I think is part of the challenge of how you keep those updated when the service providers are actually busy providing services, not keeping single databases up to date. So we'd be happy to share some of our research information as well.
Thank you.
I think I might also point to the reentry app that's being developed by the city. They probably have a feel or are developing a feel for which services are available for people in reentry.
Great, thanks. Any other final questions or comments before we officially adjourn for today? All right, thank you all for staying till the end. Thank you all for getting here early and being engaged throughout. This was another encouraging set of meetings, or a meeting. So thanks to Vera and Wendy for traveling across the country to be here, and we'll be in touch via email soon.
I'm gonna clap, that was a good song.
Okay.